What's up, fellow gamers? It is time for patch 14.1. I am Phreak. I'm the design lead of Summoners Rift Team's live pod. I'm also a low-masted Janna one trick. Let's talk about 14.1. SRT, Summoners Rift Team, is the team that I am on. There is the live pod, which I do design work on. That's largely game balance, and the other pod, which actually is has many more designers than live pod, especially recently getting the seasonal update out, is the seasonal pod, and they have been hard at work for the last several months in getting patch 14.1 ready. So I playtest with these folks every day. I have some first-hand experience playing on the content, though I did not develop any of it. I'm certainly around. I don't have oversight in telling them what to do. They're more than competent enough. And of course, it's going to be very collaborative, working together to balance these things. As I'm sure there's going to be some balance outliers, and we'll figure all that out over time. Because of that, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the individual balance states of items, because that's just going to be in flux. It's not going to be that important. Honestly, by the time you watch this video, there's probably going to be a stats site that's got updates on what's actually already winning all the games, and you can just look at that instead. It's going to do much better than me trying to nerd out over the numbers here. But I'll talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stories and whatnot, and overall what you should be thinking about with these items, especially because the fact that since I'm going to be involved in rebalancing these things, it's like, well, I'm probably going to tune this thing or ask us to tune this thing in a way where it's going to be good for these champions or whatever. Okay, so let's talk about patch 14.1. There is a buff to Hwei. Actually, there's also technically a buff to Vel'Koz here as well. And then a whole bunch of updates to items and the map and jungling and a bunch of stuff. Okay, so season start. By the time you watch this video, it's probably already live for EU West. This will be, 3 a.m. my time or 4 a.m. my time, so you have a very small chance to watch this already by the time this video comes up. If you're playing at NA, you got a couple hours if you watch this right as it comes out live, but for the most part, yeah, it's... enjoy the new season. It's going to be fun. Hopefully hit your rank goals. Good luck with all that one. One thing that's going to be mentioned later on in the patch notes is that Emerald is shrinking a little bit. So if you had just made Emerald 4, it'll be a little bit harder for you next time around. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, cool, great. There's some split rewards. Talk about that stuff later. I don't know. We're going to move on and talk about the fact that, hey, there are some gameplay changes what this video is about in the first place. So cool. Let's talk about it. All right, first up, there is a new epic monster or monsters called the Void Grubs. So before, in League of Legends, you would have Herald 1 at 8 minutes, Herald 2 at 14 minutes or later, and then Baron at 20 minutes. Now there is a first round of Void Grubs, an arguably second round of Void Grubs, and then Herald still spawns at 14 minutes. So you've suddenly got 2 more objectives to play for before 14 minutes, which is the Void Grubs. And then again, keep in mind that Herald 2 is force spawning at 14. The only Herald now is force spawning at 14. So instead of having like, okay, well, one Herald at some point after 8 minutes, another one at some point maybe after 14, but not always taken. It's like, no, there's a guaranteed Herald at 14, and you could take like Grubs at 9, Grubs at 13, and then you still get Herald coming up. So there's a lot more objectives to play around on top side. Not only is Herald stronger than old second Herald, but Void Grubs are very good as well. I expect these things to be very strong. I expect them to be very worth playing around, and I think this is a very, very good lever mechanic for making topside more valuable. A complaint players have been pretty perceptive in pointing out is that dragons seem to be the primary objective play over. Also, dragons spawn much sooner, so it's very easy to say, well, we're going to play toward bot side. We're going to get our first dragon in the between minute 5 and 7, and then because 8 minutes is pretty late into the game, we can take a reset and then go and play for top side and make it like a team objective. It's like late enough into the game that it's a team objective and not just a win bot lane, turn it into Drake. Void Grubs are trivially easy to kill at least one of. They're very valuable. What's nice is they scale linearly. In fact, you kind of want them early rather than later because the damage is sort of front-loaded. We'll talk about that later with the numbers. But essentially, it's like, oh, it's suddenly really worth playing around topside to get Void Grubs. You kind of want to path that way, or have some really intelligent jungle pathing where it's like you path towards bottom and then you only take your topside camps in the second respawn and then go into a Void Grub or whatever. Again, this camp spawns at 5 minutes, so level 6 is not happening in any reasonable scenario. But if you're going to go for like 5:36 minutes, your soul lanes can be 6. The junglers won't be. So, oh, by the way, your soul laners are 6. Oh, sounds like top and mid matter a whole lot if you're going to go for a 5:30 take on Grubs, right? So pretty big deal here. I think it's a really cool objective. Let's talk about the math overall. There's 3 of them. They spawn at 5 minutes of the game. They spawn Void Mites. Each one individually respawns, although my experience has been very commonly a team like all three will die at a pretty similar amount of time. I have had games where the top laner goes down and takes one that goes back to lane. That's actually reasonable. I want to really point that out, that like top laners can solo a Void Grub and it's not that big of a deal. You can take it down between waves if you have shove, and you don't even take that much damage. It's actually not that big of a deal. They are somewhat threatening, like you will lose some health, but depending on your champion, it might not matter very much. Of course, you can coordinate with the jungler, take it together, but I've had ones where like I took one Void Grub and then the solos collapsed on me. I left, the enemy team got the other two, but hey, I got 1/3 of the objective and moved out from there, and that was useful. I've had games where, again, my top laner went and soloed one Grub, went back to lane, and then I picked up the other two later on or something else. The respawn timers are individualized here, so you can have like sort of desynced Grub spawns, whatever. There is specifically a very big payout. If you get 5, it spawns functionally some melee minions. The melee minions have less health but move faster. This can just kind of help you get a little bit more turret damage done and whatnot. It's a nice sweetener. But the primary benefit of the buff is that you get a basically 8 or 6 DPS dot that lasts 4 seconds. This scales linearly with stacks, and so this 8 DPS can become 48 DPS, which is actually really not bad. This doesn't scale off of bonus damage, so it's disproportionately better for champs who don't already have quite a lot of damage. This is a pretty valuable objective, I think. If it's not valuable, if it doesn't actually contribute to winning games, then we'll just buff it and make it better. There's actually lots of ideas we already have on how to make it better if it needs to be nerfed. The numbers can go down. That's not hard. But overall, yeah, this has been pretty effective. There's some special rules around how it counts epic monsters. Cho'Gath cannot walk down, kill one, come back a minute later, kill another one, and get an epic monster stack for it. It's once per cycle, essentially. So right, the first 3 are cycle 1, and then any given respawn in Grug is just part of cycle 2. So you can't just like slowly get 6 epic monster stacks as Cho'Gath, but it also means if you're playing Bel'Veth, now keep in mind this thing spawns at 5 minutes before Bel'Veth gets her ultimate available. But if you can either wait for the second round of it to come in, which will happen. Well, to be fair, it'll happen after 9 minutes, so after first Herald would have spawned in old version of League of Legends, but certainly before second Herald would have happened. You could say, okay, well, I got 6 on Bel'Veth, or we managed to delay the cycle of it or whatever. No one's taken any Void Grubs, or I haven't taken any Void Grubs, and so I come in at, maybe I come in at 9:30 and I get one, and I'm level 6, so I finally get the epic version of the Bel'Veth ulti, or, something weird happens, and we just, like, no one takes the camp for a while, or Bel'Veth managed to actually power farm and gets level 6 at, 6:15 or something, and just it didn't die in the first minute, and so off she goes. Anyway, a lot of considerations here overall. Again, despawns, similar stuff to the Herald Baron stuff, where despawns 5 minutes, 5 seconds before if it's in combat, 50 seconds before if it's out of combat. But yeah, this is a cool objective. We can look at the numbers. You can look at them all you want. Doesn't really matter. I'm not here to like math out how dangerous the objective is. It certainly can be fairly dangerous, but like I fought this camp as like double longsword Bel'Veth, and it's like I'm sustaining against it. It's not that big of a deal. Again, I've mentioned several times that like I've seen top laners go and take one Grub and go back to lane. Like it'll deal damage to you, right? Like this matters. And of course we can retune this if it's wrong. But yeah, this is an objective that like you can get creep jacked on. One thing I actually want to point out, one more thing, is the grubs are a bit ranged and they're very mobile. And what you should do if you have any AoE at all is tag one and kite the camp out so that they group together. So that if you're using, Bel'Veth Qs and Bel'Veth Ws, or you're playing Diana or Hecarim or whatever, that you're getting AoE damage. Now, I do want to point out that these things actually create a missing health shield. When one Void Grub dies, the other Void Grubs get a shield, period, but that shield also scales with missing health. So if you are full AoEing at Hecarim or Diana or whatever, keep in mind that like, oh, this shield can be up to twice as large if I was chunking them really equally. It is also possible to like multi-kill them. That is certainly possible. If you have, one big AoE spell, you can kill 2 at once, and then you get to ignore the shields, and you can try to play around that timing and whatnot, right? But there is an inbuilt mechanic to make it slightly worse on AoE junglers. Keep in mind, you're going to have some AoE no matter what, because of like your jungle pet and whatnot, but bunch of mechanics here, all can be individually tuned, but just some kind of cool stuff here about the camp. Alrighty, let's move on to the next big thing, which is revamped Rift Herald. I believe Rift Herald is now a they. I believe Rift Herald is an amalgamation of multiple Void Grubs, I believe, like mechanically. So I believe so this is random, because I just remember like seeing a doc about this. I believe the Rift Scuttles are female. I believe Void Grubs don't have a gender, and then Rift Herald is, I believe, an amalgamation of Rift Grubs. I think something like that. I don't remember exactly. Either way, yeah. just kind of random. I just want to bring that up because it was like interesting that like there's more Void lore kind of coming in, if as long as that actually is canon. But that's what I remember reading. Anyway, the big thing is that Herald only spawns at 14 minutes, and Rift spawns at 14 minutes, and you can control it. Basically, think of it like a Nunu snowball or somebody Cyan ulti, where you hop in, you steer, and you cruise your way around. If you hit a champion, you knock them up and deal some damage. If you slam at a turret, you deal a bunch of damage. Right, here's the mechanics on how far it goes. Here's how far you get pushed. There's damage and whatnot. You can get Void Might spawning because, of course, right, the first 2 rounds of Void Grub spawns have happened already, and then if you have a bunch of stacks, then congratulations, right? You get 5 plus how many stacks you got. Void Might's coming out to attack the tower and whatnot. You get a shield. All really cool stuff here. Just like, it's a really fun to play for. It feels really, really great to go for the one and only Rift Herald. It, like, in my mind, still feels like second Herald, but it's just the Herald. I have to like remind myself that like the 50-minute Rift Herald is really, really valuable because it's just kind of stronger. It's really cool stuff for all. I mean, you can pour through all the numbers if you really want. It's not that important. The important thing is like it feels really good to drive this thing. Anyone can, like, if you have the eye, you summon it, and then anyone can right click to jump in, and then you steer the thing around. Again, I've literally had a case where I think I drove over someone and killed them, and then drove into the base and knocked up someone who was running back, and then like fought them in their base once. Like, you get some really fun things. Like, this is actually like one of the absolute funnest things in the new seasonal update. I really like this. Like, it's really, really fun overall. There is some anti-solo mechanics here. Baron's Gaze, right, is when Baron hits you, you do half damage to it. Now, Rift Herald has this as well, so this is going to be an objective that requires a little bit more that your team comes down. It's worth it. It's a real objective, right? First, it's not as bad as second Herald, so it's like really worth someone coming down and helping. Anyone who helped gets empowered recall. This feels great. This persists through death, by the way. I've had my games where it's like, yeah, we just fought Herald, and then I don't know, I just like got busy, whatever, and like I got in a fight and died, and I bought some items, and I didn't have to buy for a while because I just bought items, and then I like recalled 8 minutes later. I was like, oh, I still have empowered recall. That's cool. Overall, just kind of feels good to get one nice good recall. This also means like, hey, you can, I mean, it takes more than 4 seconds to walk down the river, so it's not like you're going to recall faster by, okay, I shoved my wave in top lane, I'm now going to get a faster recall by helping with Herald, but it's just like, you might as well help with Herald. You save 4 seconds doing so. End of the day, or you like save your recall for a little bit later. Regardless, it's like, more connective tissue is kind of nice in the map. I'm glad that there's a little bit more going on, right? There's one extra epic objective coming up overall. The value of top-side epic objectives are stronger, I think, on this patch overall, which are all good things. And yeah, I'm just a fan of League having lots of strong touch points for you to group up with your team and do stuff together. And I think Herald is one of them. Herald gold is shared on Crash with everyone who helped kill the Herald, not just the one who summoned it, so it doesn't matter as much who summoned it. It's no longer, funnel the gold towards whoever has the eye or whatever else. I think that's that's really, really nice as well. And then, hey, if you manage to fail to summon it in the entire time, it will summon it for you. If you're dead, it'll summon at your fountain. So, hey, some loss aversion if you really screw up at using Rift Herald. Unchanged stats, let's move on. Next thing, there are now Voidborn red and blue buffs, as well as scuttle crabs. So basically, instead of you having buff sharing when you finish your jungle quest, instead, what's going to happen is that when you get an elemental terrain, when the second Drake is slain, you get an elemental terrain, you actually get the buff sharing that is currently in League of Legends. My recollection of when Jungle Quest would complete would be around 16 minutes. I don't know what the exact average is, but it's like somewhere around there. So as long as you're killing dragons at like a reasonable clip, like this could be as soon as 10, 11 minutes into the game. If you're killing dragons reasonably quickly, you're basically going to get the duplicated red and blue buff earlier than before. Also, if you're getting completely just smacked down as a jungler, you're not going to get anything done, and you just like don't get your treats all the way down, then hey, you still get shared buffs, no big deal. It's already there for you, whatever. Of course, there are some games where you aren't taking any dragons, and then the buff sharing isn't on any sooner, or it's coming on later, or just isn't at all until you get to Void Terrain. But the really bigger one is that after 20 minutes, once they respawn, you get a Voidborn red and blue buff, and the buffs are now global. They go to everyone who is alive on your team, but those ones will no longer spread or transfer on champion kill. So you won't like take someone's red buff anymore. It'll just drop away. So late game, I mean, certainly like a team will have 5 red buffs or a team will have 5 blue buffs, and that certainly matters. It's certainly a pretty big deal. But it's nice because now it's like, oh, red, and blue buff are these really big, really important objectives to play for. As sort of one of the stories, when I was developing the jungle work in 13.20, we were already playing on these global red and blue buffs by the time I'd put in the like heavily increased health totals on them. So probably some of that was like my internal bias of like, wow, these things are really strong, but also the camps just felt way too fragile for how important red and blue were. So yeah, these camps are quite strong. They're quite durable. I believe they're a little bit more durable even now. I think there's an extra buff on them when they're purple. But again, they're global, pretty big deal. Makes you like really care about taking these things down, and it's also nice because since they're global, it really gives someone else like a lot of free time, because like anyone can take that red buff down and then goes to all 5, and congratulations, they don't have to run down. I mean, they're just like way more propagated. Now, as counterbalance to that, blue buff is being nerfed. This is, by the way, a level 11 breakpoint, and then red buff is the same, but just stops scaling, so you don't get the level 11 breakpoint. So 1 through level 10 is identical for this thing, but then 11 plus is weaker. You get less health regen. Blue buff is back to the overage, which is just 10 ability haste. Whatever. It means you get a little bit of faster jungle clearing because you get the 5 haste on your blue if you take it early in your clear. Whatever, kind of a minor thing there, but just want to kind of bring it up. Just, yeah, as a minor point overall. Not much else to say here. The buffs are slightly less strong late game because they are 5x'd instead of 2x'd, but obviously they're really important objectives now. Pretty cool to play around them. Empowered Scuttler, Voidborn Scuttle, is a Chemtech Scryer's Bloom, so really big AoE reveal, puts wards at 1 HP, and basically just guarantees, like, oh, do we kill this in front of Baron Pit? Well, we guarantee we have swept Baron Pit. Kill it in front of Dragon Pit, we guarantee we sweep Dragon Pit. Definitely really valuable. And keep in mind that, like, because this happens after Baron spawns, guess what? Every Baron, I shouldn't say every Baron, every Baron side Scuttle is going to sweep wards in front of actual Baron. So warding Baron, keeping Baron ward is going to be much, much more difficult, because whichever team gets Scuttled, by the way, guess what? Really important objective, right? Like, hey, red and blue buff are 5 times as valuable. Scuttle is guarantee you have complete vision control over that side of the map for the epic objective, as long as it's alive in the next minute or so, right? Like, it's guaranteed ward sweeping. Like, that's really, really powerful. It like really, really matters. So there is a lot of value here in these things. I think maybe we can go even harder. My experience has been that purple Scuttle and red and blue buff still feel pretty easy to kill. So maybe they should go higher, or maybe they're meant to be like relatively easy to like solo kill, and you don't like need, like, I don't think your team should have to come down and help you kill Scuttle, to be clear. But it does mean that whichever team controls Scuttle is getting a really big burst in power. Same with blue, same with red, and also means like stealing red, stealing blue is a really, really big swing in power, because you're taking away like 5 global blue buffs, and that's like a really big deal, right? So this definitely matters some. I think it's sort of on balance less important than Void Grubs existing and like new Herald in a way, but like these things really do matter. Like they really do apply something meaningful here. So one of the interesting things going on here is there are 3 copies of Baron Nashor now. So there's slight differences in the model. There are very visually obvious differences to the Baron Pit itself. So here's more or less the normal looking one. There's one that's open with a rock in the middle, and then there's one that's kind of tube shaped. I will say that my experience playing has been I mostly notice the terrain difference. The encounter differences exist in that Baron casts a different spell, but like, they're all dodgeable anyways. Like, I have gotten like vacuum pulled by Baron once before, and whatnot, but like, end of the day, it's kind of just Baron. I don't think it's actually meant to be like really meaningfully different. Just kind of want to point out that, hey, there are differences here. The terrain, I would argue, is the most meaningful difference here. The fact that like you can go out left to right is like a really big deal here, right? That's primarily what it is. Like, I want to say that, in my experience, the fact that most of Baron's numbers didn't change all that much, by the way. I think there's some differences in durability and damage, I'm not sure. But regardless, new terrain differences, definitely a really big deal. They are going to change how you're going to play around the Baron fights, how you're going to have to keep people out of the pit and whatnot, because this is obviously a really easy walk in. So, hey, that's going to be something to play around. That's going to be something to look out for. I think it's actually been really cool. I've been a fan of these changes since they've been in. I think it's really fun stuff. Cool beans. So there are other terrain changes than just Baron. Let's talk about them. So in the top side, this is the new look on the top side. One thing I actually want to point out that's actually really meaningful is this brush and the one to the right. It's actually much easier, I have found, to basically like ward enemy Krugs and have the ward like really, really matter, especially around bot steps, we'll talk about later. But overall, basically, it is harder to gank red side top lane because you no longer get around behind the turret here, right? You don't have this path anymore. That matters a lot. My experience has still been that top lane feels pretty gankable. Like this opening is so wide that like I can still like come up and like if my enemy top laner is pushing and they're like up here, guess what? I have all this room to get behind them, like still, right? In fact, I have even more room to get around here and behind them. If you're around here, I can still get below you. If you're red team pushing down, I still have a lot of room to get behind you here, right? I don't have to go here. Like if you're under your turret, guess what? You're still safe, right? If you're red team under your turret, I have to go all the way behind and be kind of isolated. Yeah, I get brushed to do it, but like I'm isolated and my top laner can't join me if I'm gonna come gank, right? And similar, around here, like yes, a mid laner can roam and come behind the turret and you can kind of pinch. Like this is unchanged on blue side basically, and the mirror image exists here, right? If my mid laner wants to come around and pinch the wave and hold the wave and I'm gonna shove in and we're gonna dive, like that still happens, right? That's still available, but you don't have as much connective tissue to like come join each other. You can still get behind someone if they're pushing, but you don't have just as easy as straightforward dives. You have to kind of go into enemy territory. You have to go through some brush, which could be scary if someone's waiting for you. It certainly does make ganking a little bit harder, but I want to point out one really big thing, which is this brush is super, super, super meaningful. I really believe that this brush is massive. There's one in bottom side as well, but this brush sees like it sees the entrance up to here. It sees the entrance, of course, in and out of tri-brush. It sees if someone comes out of tri-brush and tries to come around because doing some kind of weird wrap from like Krugs into the lane. All these things get seen. This brush is huge, 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 and really, 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 really worth controlling. And if you have like permanent push and you have this control word here, obviously you can see them when they get here. If you're like in front of their tower, guess what? They're gonna get behind you, right? This path is short. But if you can get away from the enemy top laner, you still have the way to get out. And the fact that you can put the brush, a ward in a brush itself. Like it was always possible to ward in the river and see all the paths up and out and down and whatever, but having a bespoke brush, they know really ward right here. And the fact that like, if it's a control ward, you can get rid of your enemy's ward to do so because, hey, find me a good useful ward spot that doesn't get seen by this control ward that like doesn't have you like run all the way down the river and get chased down by the enemy top laner or ganked by the jungler, right? So it's like, if you can have pressure and have like ward control on this brush, I think you can get a lot of power out of this. So I think this is actually really valuable. Next thing is mid lane. These brushes got moved back from around here to around there. This is like, 500-600 units. Pretty big deal. This certainly is a bit of a longer gank path. I played a game of playtesting today. I was Belveth. My mid laner was TF. We're against Diana. And it's like, yeah, she's hitting the wave right here. And I'm like, I just walk in for the brush. And guess what? Like, I have a TF gold card. Like, this gank is not hard because I have a gold card on my team. Or my top lane was Lissandra. It's like, you go to the top lane thing and it's like, yeah, dude, Lissandra's going to EW. Guess what we're going to get here, right? These lanes aren't ungankable, but you definitely want a little bit more setup to make it happen. And then it happens and it's fine. But these lanes are less gankable. One of the primary drivers here, from my recollection, was they wanted non-dashing mid laners to be safer. One thing that's kind of nice is if you're... That's like you can ward like here or something, right? And obviously some people want to ward in the brush, and I get that. But if you like ward in the river here, you can easily see the entrance in the brush. You can see the entrance into your jungles, whatever, and just chilling right here in the middle of the river or right here in the middle of the river. I want to point out like this brush here. If you put it at the edge, it doesn't see everything, right? Like you can't like put a ward here and see someone wrapping around here. So like if let's say you're playing blue team, right? And you want to like ward top side, you're still going to ward like around here or something, right? Like you're still going to ward this kind of area. I mean, you can ward the brush, it's fine, but it means you don't see like this wrap in case they want to do that. It means you can't see them kind of wrap up towards top side, so you still kind of want to ward around here. But it means if you don't have wards at all and they come to get you from the brush, well, you're no longer in like easy Kha'Zix R plus walk range, especially with like blue smite, blue pet. So like if your wards do fail, you have more time to like, oh shoot, I'm Brand, I'm running away, and you can like come down here, maybe come down to your turret in time without getting as easily assured you're not in like Kha'Zix unevolved leap range, for example, or Hecarim without ghost easy each range. Reach range. So, gives you about a second extra to react. You could still do all the same, sort of normal ward spots. Pretty cool stuff. This avenue here as well, sort of nice. There's no like easy turret wrap around the blue team, right? You're going to take multiple turret shots if you go through here. Same for red side. You kind of can't cheat through anymore. So it's some extra kind of safety here where the sort of like behind tower gank is just a lot more difficult. You sort of like the Raptor's wall jump, if you're going to do like a Rek'Sai tunnel or something. But yeah, it's just a lot safer to play mid, right? Like it just is. That's just true. Bot side, blue side, not really changed very meaningfully. The red side, basically this wall is opened up here, so you can, if let's say I'm blue team mid laner, I can, instead of coming down and running through this brush and then trying to gank red team, I can come around here. This is not in turret range. I can wrap around no problem. Much like with blue team, you can wrap around no problem. You're not in turret threat. You can wrap around and then like, hey, I've ganked from behind you. Red team's pushing down. I come behind and if I don't want to come to the river. Now keep in mind again, if red team's pushing and they ward this brush, guess what? They're going to see you come up towards try. right? If you come up through here, guess what? They're going to see you. They can walk back and they can be 2v1 against you or whatever. But yes, it does give you some good jungle paths. Obviously, this does some different stuff. I will say though, this brush feels much more wardable as blue team now because there's a straight walk in. So like, you know, the Fiddlesticks and Zac ganks, right? That like blue team would like push up and they like wouldn't have it, like you'd have to like basically walk up to the tower and then like ward over the wall here to like get into the tri-brush, and then you could like finally see Zac and Fiddlesticks ganks, and then once in a while someone would like control ward that brush and you'd never get it again. And now it's like, oh no, as blue team, like we push the wave, I can ward this if we don't expect to like push forever and we just want river control, or we can actually ward this and it's actually fine. And this sees the jungler come down from Grump, this sees him come down from blue buff. It's not going to see every river move. Obviously, if like red team Miller wants to roam down, they hug this wall because like someone called that it's tri-brush ward. They can hug this wall and they're going to get behind you and you're not going to see them. This ward obviously sees them, no problem. But it's nice because like this. What's nice about this ward here, right, is like this was actually already like the good ward. A lot of times when I'm playing red team and we're pushing his bot lane, I would ward here, like not in the banana brush, but I just ward here because it would see the exit tri-brush, it would see the walk down from dragon, and it would give us like pretty good forewarning, right? They're coming down from dragon, I can see them a little bit sooner. I can see the mid lane roam, 2 or 3 seconds sooner than if I put it in the brush over here, right? And I can see them come out of tri-brush, 2 seconds sooner as well, right? It's like a much better ward. So now just like what's interesting is like the already better ward is just now obvious. It's like now just obvious that you should be doing it this way. So I actually really like this. I like the sort of affordance of saying, hey, put the ward in the good spot. You can, I think, grief yourself by like putting the ward at the very bottom and you like won't see this lip here, but like that would be trolling. If you go to the far right, I think you still see this lip. But like if you put it in like the top right, you might not see this wrap. Like you're just griefing if you're doing that, right? So like if you're red team, you should put it towards the left, and if you're playing blue team, put it towards the top, and then you're gonna see everything and you're gonna be fine. Anyway, but yeah, I've noticed that, my experience playing blue team, it's like you can play for this brush or you can play for this brush. If you're more worried about their jungler as opposed to like something else, like yeah, sometimes their jungler will actually come down like left side of blue buff and come around and then hug this wall, then come around. But like that's really rare. But you can like we've fought over the brush many times, like much more often than back in the day, right? Of what 3 days ago when I was playing solo queue. This brush is actually fightable, and so there's actually like a meaningful objective here. I mean, much like when I'm playing red team, right? Like I like this board as well. So now you have like 3 brushes we're fighting over in bot lane, which is like actually a lot of territory to fight over. It's pretty meaningful. Yeah, it's a pretty meaningful change actually. I think bot lane is sort of the most changed territory because you have actually 3 contestable good brushes to ward. Alrighty, so some minor jungle updates. The walk into dragon now has this sort of flat wall here, so you can come out, down or left at a blue buff. Again, I want to point out that like this brush like does not see the way of this wall. Like if you ward here, like you'll see this, right? Like you'll see the mid to bot roam, no problem with this brush. I'm pretty sure it's like impossible to dodge if you put it like here or something. You'll see like up towards here and you'll see down towards there, so there's no way to get past it, right? So if you're trying to like cover the like mid to bot roam, you can cover this brush or you can cover this brush. Either one's fine, but like, hey, this is how you would cover it. But it means you're not going to see like this wrap, right? If they're going to come down and go this way, you're not going to see it. And meanwhile, if you're going to ward this brush, you're not going to see a jungler come through. If they're going to like do this and like come down to scuttle or like wrap around because they're dodging tri-brush or something. So you don't have, there's not like really a god ward here in like bottom river or top river, like on the mid side, in the way that like bot lane kind of has, this one is like a pretty solid, just like guaranteed ward. So you have like some kind of weird stuff here. I generally wouldn't say warding the river is that good. It's probably fine, but again, the fact that you can bypass it a little bit with this brush, you probably hug this wall and kind of break some line of sight if you don't have like really exact positioning here. So I don't know, some interesting thoughts here. I think we'll see how warding ends up panning out for both bot side and top side of mid, but definitely interesting stuff here. So one other thing is there is a rework to Infernal terrain. It now drops some cinders on the ground. Basically, you grab them, you get stacks of ability haste, you drop some on death. It's kind of the hats from the April Fool's event from April of last year. This has been okay. I don't think it's like the highlight of the seasonal update, but like collecting hats is kind of fun. It's fine. Just like the other things just like have been more exciting for me, and so like this is there. I'm kind of glad there's not like more terrain deformation when there's already a bunch of terrain changes, so I think good to remove some of it, and this is like functional, which is fine. There is one direct buff from the patch, which is Wei. He's getting +3 armor. Long term, we might have to nerf him, that's fine, but I think for now, basically trying to make sure that Hui's solo queue teammates are not getting held down by people who aren't very good at him just yet, so okay, that's fine. In the case of Vel'Koz, there are actually some strict buffs here. So August did these changes, basically made the call that, yep, Vel'Koz E is allowed to be like basically just very, very good in short range. The indicator now doesn't show until after it has started casting. So this makes it harder to dodge in melee range because you don't get the warning indicator for nearly as long, plus the, of course, travel time difference. And now it won't look like the spell fails to cast when dying because you're just starting to cast a spell. All spells basically cancel if you die while casting them. So now this doesn't appear like players are losing a spell cast. It's going to work the normal way. But of course, less indicator time certainly makes the champion harder to play around. So, I mean, pretty meaningful Vel'Koz, don't get me wrong. Maybe he's OP. We'll see what happens. But yeah, obviously some meaningful changes. Let's talk about the fact that there is some small jungle updates going on. So because we expect ganking to be harder with the terrain changes because there are better warding spots that can cover more terrain or more distance, the fact that a lot of these walls and brushes got pushed back, so especially solo laners have a lot more space to see that, oh, by the way, there's a jungle coming and they're going to get away. We expect that junglers who rely on ganking because they are bad at clearing, we're going to have a really, really hard time in the seasonal update. And so these are changes that I did basically to attach onto the seasonal update, which is say, okay, if you are bad at clearing, we're going to make your clearing better. And sort of contrapositively, if you're already good at clearing, and we think clearing is going to be a more appreciated skill in the new update because you just want to get your levels and then be a better duelist that you can go fight for the extra epic monsters that are spawning in the game. Not to mention the fact that red and blue buff are like more valuable than before. And scuttle, all these things. Like if you're better at killing jungle monsters, well, like directly jungle monster killing got buffed in this season, right? Like the stronger red and blue, stronger scuttle, all these things, right? So this is basically saying, okay, if you already have high DPS, you're going to do a little bit less. And if you already have low DPS, the guaranteed damage from just simply having champion levels is going up. This is meant to be, on average, relatively power neutral. That's the goal here. The goal is to be relatively power neutral overall in its impact. Obviously, there's going to be some outliers. A champion like Karthus is probably going to get hurt here in terms of direct gains. However, first blue buff has more ability haste on it, which is a direct clear speed increase to his Q, as well as the fact that he doesn't have to walk over to grab his blue when he wants to get the blue because someone else can kill it and he gets the buff automatically. And the fact that ganking is harder anyway, so like, does Karthus really care that ganking got harder? I don't know what the resulting win rate impact is going to be. I just know that there's going to be some changes here. I don't expect the numbers are perfect, any of these things really, but that's kind of the goal behind these changes. I do have some numbers. Flashbang warning. There is a epic monster damage cap. Flashbang warning. Here we go. That took a long time to load. Okay. I forgot to zoom in, so let's go ahead and zoom in. Okay, so I actually forgot to pick up the Void Grub stuff from earlier, but this is basically, assuming you get Void Grubs as early as level 4, and you get all 3 stacks, let's take a relatively normal AD carry turret DPS, and then add getting 3 Void Grubs here, and getting 6 Void Grubs here. I made up level 10, but whatever. And you can see that if you're a default AD carry, you can get around, like if your team gets all of them, you can get like a 30 to 10% DPS increase on turrets. If you are just chain hitting, here's the DPS increase. If you're playing a solo lane tank, I'm assuming level 6 for your first set of grubs because solo lane, of course, get more XP. But if you're playing, Leona or something, and you're a tank who's playing in a dual lane, then, guess what? This starts a little bit sooner, right? And we can, maybe drag this up a little bit because why not? But you can see that if you don't have a lot of baseline DPS, as you get your first set around, this level, and then the next spike looks like here around level 11. This can give you like almost double your damage against turrets. So impact of Void Grubs, by the way, are, tanks can do almost double DPS of turrets. Of course, things like Demolish are not being accounted for here and whatnot. If you do have any sort of like ancillary forms of ability power from like, I don't know, like a Baron buff or something, then that's going to be different, or Infernal Drakes or whatever, sure. If your spells happen to work, all those things can certainly change the math around a little bit. But anyway, Void Grubs mean a whole lot more for bad turret killers than for good turret killers. Let's talk about pet DPS and the math overall. So this is just the baseline DPS of the pet before and after. This is, for an example, AD champion. This is like a Graves or a Kindred who's just really only building pure AD and no health. This, to be fair, is the most undercounted. The AD ratio is the weakest ratio on the pet, but hey, on the lowest level possible, here is the difference in pet DPS. The pet can do, triple your damage almost, or sorry, the amount of damage coming out of specifically the pet is tripled. And then if you're playing something more mid-size, like a Mage, where the AP ratio is higher and they also build more ability power than you would build AD, so like, a Karthus or a Diana, Diana, for example, the pet is still doing somewhere around like double, the pet DPS itself. This actually means if you're going to put a dot and kite with the pet's going to do twice as much, kite damage. If your overall like baseline DPS sucks, well, congratulations, you're going this way, right? If you're if you're running, cooldown boots and other stuff, and you don't have any sources of bonus AP and whatnot, or you go like Swifties even, and there's literally no clear increase by getting those things, then you go this way. Okay, this is the basically math though on what is the tooltip DPS required for this change to be a buff for your champion. So tooltip DPS of 38 is basically just auto-attacking without spells. So technically this does mean your very first camp is going to be a bit slower. But a tooltip DPS of 72 is, other than like exactly Karthus Q, this is basically much stronger. Keep in mind, like, first 3 levels, like, you're not going to generally see, 100 or so tooltip DPS on any given champion. Like, a Maokai Q can do like 400 damage, but it's got like an 8-second cooldown, right? Like, the tooltip DPS of Maokai Q is like 50 or something. And its auto attacks are lower than that. So, for a very large portion of champions, like, this is a really big clear increase, especially sort of like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th camp of your first clear. It's going to depend on the champion, of course. A lot of champions simply don't have, and also I want to really point out that this is AoE, right? If you're only hitting red and blue buff, yeah, if I have 380 tooltip DPS against red or blue buff, this is power neutral. But if I'm Wukong fighting raptors, there is no way in hell I'm doing 340 DPS to every raptor. It is not possible, even with Titanic Hydra. It's not close. And so what this does a lot of is it helps a lot at least, by saying, okay, look, is your DPS 340 to every single jungle monster on the camp? No, it's a buff to all these single target junglers who are really, really bad at the AoE camps, like raptors, and to some extent wolves. It's not that hard for Wukong to kill wolves on time, but like Trundle and Warwick, I know Trundle's already very, very good on top lane. We might have to nerf him at some point, but that's kind of the move here, right? Is by putting much more of the DPS into the pet and making it guaranteed, we're essentially trying to unpunish some of the single target junglers because, like, hey, Raptors is a core camp. It exists. It's real. Clearing it matters. So making that a little bit nicer. So that's the math here. The epic monster cap is because this damage does not apply to epic monsters, but this damage does. And epic monsters were dying way too fast with only this coming in line. Since, hey, by the way, like, this damage amp change doesn't even exist. Like, this nerf doesn't even exist against epic monsters, so it was just making these things die way too fast. So I put in a cap. The cap basically mirrors a relatively normal like AD champion damage here. So yeah, if you're playing like Rammus is getting less pet DPS against Baron and Dragon and Void Grubs or whatever, but also getting pretty good pet DPS here because generally speaking this is going to be positive. Even on something like red and blue buff, where like, hey, he's just not doing 300 tooltip DPS to red and blue buff, right? He's just not. So math goes up, and Rammus is going to one-shot all the Raptors anyway. It doesn't really matter. So anyone who is like really bad at single target or really bad at AoE gets like nicely smoothed out by these changes overall. Okay, so now, of course, while you're here, we are 38 minutes into the video. Here are all the item changes. Now, I'm not doing a ton of math on every single item. I started building this video out when I came home. I spent about I spent like an hour and a half reading through the patch notes and putting out what math I thought was useful, and then I just started recording. I want to get done before like 1 a.m. So I'm not super deep diving into every single change. Hopefully it's going to be useful. The big thing is there are no longer mythic items. Mythic items were meant to be like 130% or so gold efficient. We're trying to constrain legendaries to around 110, give or take, or around I forget, maybe it's around 120, give or take. But my recollection of the goals, I was involved occasionally with this kind of stuff, was we didn't want to overall lower the power level of items as a system, but we acknowledged that mythic passives were carrying some power and that mythics were very, very strong. So obviously any given mythic item or form of the mythic item is getting weaker, and then in general, we buffed legendaries to say that, the average build, which goes to 3 items, should be a relatively similar amount of power. But a 1-item spike would be weaker because you're not spiking on a mythic anymore, right? So that's kind of the idea of what's going on here. In that you're going to generally see legendaries get a little bit more powerful, and the former mythics, which were obviously like all ubiquitous, right? They were clearly overpowered. You got one every game. Those are obviously going down. So one item's going to be a little bit weaker. Two items going to be probably slightly weaker. Three items going to be about the same. And then 4 and 5 probably going to be a little bit stronger. This is generally what it's going to look like if the math is going to work out. Okay, so first up, Mage items. One of the big updates here. Mythic item Cry of the Shatter Queen, Mythic item Everfrost are both gone. Leeching Leer as an Omnivamp component is gone. Demonic Embrace is being split into 2 items, Liandry's and Riftmaker. Stopwatch, Perfectly Timed Stopwatch are gone. There is a replacement rune for Perfectly Timed Stopwatch. Stopwatch longer builds into Guardian Angel in any way, and now this is just built into Zhonya's Hourglass and Seeker's Arm Guard itself. So first up, new Riftmaker. So pretty similar stat line to before, right? This is meant to be a solid AP bruiser component. You get a ramping damage amp in combat. When your ramping is done, you get Omnivamp. And I want to point out a rules change that's really valuable. It's written here, but I want to call it out, is that Omnivamp is no longer AoE gated. It is champion versus minion gated. This is a very big change. This matters a lot. This means that Fiddlesticks is getting full Omnivamp value. Mordekaiser, Lilia, they're getting full Omnivamp value when hitting champions, but it makes Omnivamp not a good heal you in between waves mechanic. Which is interesting because it now makes it kind of different from Lifesteal, where if you're, 2-item Sivir and you went BT second or Shield Bow second or whatever, and you're just auto-attacking, you're healing 10-12% of every auto-attack on every minion. You're going to get a lot of health back because you're, dealing 200 damage per auto on average if you're counting for crits. And that's really good. You're getting a lot of health back this way. You're getting, 20 health per auto-attack. Not only does Riftmaker not give the Omnivamp easily in minions because it's per second in combat with champions, but any other source of Omnivamp work the same way, where you're going to get very little value when hitting minion waves. But it does mean that, again, Mordekaiser, Nunu, whatever, if you're going to go Riftmaker and be an AP bruiser, Zac, who's all of his spells are AoE, gets to go full value. And now trying to drain tank as an AP bruiser is a viable path forward. Omnivamp, no matter what your combat looks like, whether you're auto-attacking, casting single target spells, casting AoE spells, relying on pets, you're going to get full value in PvP healing, which I think is cool. I am a fan of the rules change. There's certainly some risks with it, but I think this makes the stat feel better in the spots where it's meant to feel good. You get the old Demonic Embrace, 2% bonus health as bonus ability power. Even if you're on a really, really big build, like let's say you're not Cho'Gath, but you still have 2,000-3,000 bonus health. This text is, 40 to 60 extra ability power. Now, to be clear, that's very good for one line of text, but it's not like, oh my gosh, all of my damage forever is carried. But it's like, hey, if you have 2,000 bonus health and the only item you buy is Riftmaker, that's still 120 AP on an item. And then also deal 10% more damage, which is pretty good, right, for any long duration kind of fight going on here. So, hopefully this is tuned correctly. If it's not, of course, we can buff it till it has good users, but, very clearly positioned to be a long duration, right, a passive that synergizes with being already durable, playing long duration fights. If a kit wants to play long duration fights, a build that already has some bonus health onto it. And then just, pretty standard bruiser style stats where you get ability power, health, and ability haste. Malignance is one of the new Lost Chapter items that is specifically tuned towards being on ultimates. So you'll see this stat line quite a bit on the Lost Chapter upgrades, where it's about this much ability power, about this much ability haste, about this much mana. But the special sauce is that this is a 40 ability haste item for ultimates. That is, of course, a lot of ability haste for ultimates. Obviously, a really, really big deal. Now, it's worth noting, though, that Hate Fog specifically biases toward low cooldown ultimates, because Hate Fog synergizes with the rest of your kit, right? If I'm playing Karthus, and I'm playing Zombie Karthus, and I fight, and I use my Q, and I use my E, and then I die, and then I cast my ult at the end of my passive, I am not getting the Magic Pen, right? I'm not getting the Magic Pen, the MR Shred, for any of the rest of my kit. It is there for the dot at the very end, and the dot is fine. It's reasonable. It exists, sure, but it's not a ton, right? It's there. It's useful, but it's okay. Well, really, if I'm doing it for cards, I'm doing it for the ulti ability haste, but the dot's not really synergizing. Whereas if I'm playing Swain, I'm doing a lot of Swain damage with this dot, right? I'm keeping Hate Fog on them permanently, basically, and I'm going to land my low cooldown Q. I might land a W, might land an E. I'm going to land Soul Flare at the end of it, or in the middle of it, whatever, and I'm going to keep them under this effect, and I'm going to have MR Shred for all of my ongoing damage, the ongoing R duration, the repeat Q cast, etc. If I'm playing Fiddlesticks, right, it's on for Corrosive Flame Malzahar. I press E, Q, and then I start R. If my Q hasn't landed yet, which it often hasn't yet, if I'm actually doing EQR, I started R, the pool comes in, then the Q hits. Guess what? I'm getting the Magic Pen for the Q. I'm getting it for the Void Links on my W, right? Like, these are the kind of champions are actually much better on. Diana, keep in mind, her R is only going to land at the very end. It's damage with the ultimate, so it's, you know, they get sucked in and then it explodes. But hey, she's going to keep autoing probably. She's not one-shotting you. So you have to kind of realize that, like, actually a lot of the value here, certainly, like, the 40 ability haste really, really matters. But you have to think about it. This needs to be for champions who are ulting in the middle of their combat pattern. Anivia being another really core one here, right? Where Anivia cares about this a lot. And it's like, yeah, she's going to R. And then when you're in her R, right, your MR Shredder, you're taking the damage, and then now you're cooked for the E. Now you're cooked, you know, you're slowed enough that I'm going to land, you know, both halves of the Q or whatever, right? So that's kind of champion is going to feel good about this item. Luden's Tempest becomes Luden's Companion. Basically, there's actually a lot of power going down here. It's more expensive, so, you know, 200 more gold than Malignance, but with that you get 10 more ability power. The big downgrade, though, from Old Ludens is no Magic Pen. And Old Ludens had a ton. It was 6 flat and then 5 per legendary, which is really, 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 really massive. That was a lot of power. Magic Pen can maximally be worth 1% more damage per flat point of Magic Pen if you pen them exactly to 0. So, you know, 3 item Ludens, if you had Sork Shoes and they had, 39 MR, Ludens was a 21% more damage line of text, which is extremely good for one line and a mythic passive. For all of your magic damage. Like, that is extremely, extremely powerful. And so that is a lot of power being lost here by the no longer mythic Luden's Companion. That said, it's still some guaranteed burst damage. The damage here is pretty reasonable. It's, you know, I think fairly gold efficient. It's a live chapter item. You can buy it early, and yeah, this damage is pretty solid. So I don't think this will be a flashbang. Let's do some math. Okay, so here is the impact of the Hate Fog MR Shred. This is basically taking a default melee champion's base stats, would have 42 to 67 MR at this point in time, and if I shred them, how much damage am I getting out of this? And you can see that, yeah, Hate Fog is worth 5 to 12% more damage. Now, up against a, like, let's say I'm going to fight an enemy AD carry who's lower level and didn't run an MR shard and has less MR from growth stats because range champions get less MR from growth stats. This is an even bigger shred. If I'm against you know, Yasuo in lane who has good MR but also is running an MR shred, maybe even Merc shreds, it's going to be less than this, right? But this is kind of the math out here in terms of, you know, ballpark what the damage up is doing. And then just for fun, what is the DPS of the Hate Fog burn, and then what is the damage per proc on Luden's Companion? Relatively similar numbers. The numbers just here to have them. Like, you kind of notice that, like, neither of them scale that hard. This line is 538 bonus ability power, counting the item. You can see it doesn't really double from where you pick it up. This is around, like, 95, which is basically, like, Doran's Ring plus the item itself. So, yeah, you know, this scales some. Luden's damage scales to roughly double, and even more if you can get Death Cap. And Hate Fog doesn't really scale. That the scaling is in the percent damage amp, so via the Magic Pen. So that's actually a lot of the power. A lot of the power is in the damage amp, and then of course the ability has given you more ultimates. Stormsurge is definitely one of the items that's been talked about a whole lot. This is a not mana item. You probably buy this one second or later. I am very happy though to see there are 2 Magic Penetration legendaries. This plus Shadowflame are Magic Pen legendaries. I'm a really big fan of this one. I'm a fan of mages being able to opt into a damage profile. So if Void Staff is good, they opt into percent pen. If flat pen is good and on multiple spots, they opt into a flat pen build. So they're worse at killing Galio or worse at killing Gramus or worse at killing anyone with a Wit's End or whatever. But they spec in towards killing squishies more easily or whatever, which I think is good. I think it's important that you have the ability to tune your damage a certain way and have strengths and weaknesses in your damage profile. I'm generally a fan of things like, you know, flat pen because they're usually pretty obvious in terms of what they're about. The way Stormsurge works, basically, if you do a bunch of damage, you get a move speed boost, and then after 2 seconds, it does a bunch of damage. The damage output's actually quite high. So keep in mind that the way Ludens works, right, is amount of damage. You can hit someone 5 extra times with a shot charge if they're single targeted, and you deal about 1/3 damage, right, on repeated hits, which means you do 1, and then about another 1.7 from the other 5 hits. You can do about like 2.5-ish times damage from Luden's Companion here, and then the Stormsurge just does the damage on the tin, which is actually a pretty good ability power ratio, pretty good base damage. Let's look at the numbers real quick, which is, yeah, so if you're doing here, right, 210 to 450 or so, if you 2.5x this, you're looking at 120 to 200. So like it's not doing as much damage, right? Don't get me wrong, it's half as much. But the fact that Ludens is going to get charges constantly, it can help with wave clear. It's also not really a comparable item because this is a Lost Chapter build and this is a different item. It's got a different stat profile, everything else, but there's no ability haste on it, etc. So all these things matter. But like, hey, by the way, yes, Stormsurge in fact will always deal more burst damage than Ludens. Yes, indeed. Okay, fine. Anyway, yeah, Stormsurge, move speed, magic pen, ability power, no haste, right? And no health, I want to point out, right? There's far fewer mage items with health on them. I think this is one thing that actually is incredibly underrated in the current mage system, is that mages actually get to be decently durable because there just is health on some items. Now, the end result of like a lot of these changes is going to be like mage is going to be squishier, and mage is going to be far burstier because the amount of ability power per item is going up quite a bit. So mage is going to be a lot burstier if they're going for the standard like Stormsurge and Shadowflame type items because there's no health and there's just like flat pen and they're going to be really bursty. That's going to matter. Now, again, losing the Luden's Tempest stuff is going to matter a lot as well because you're just like straight up. If your build was Luden's Shadowflame into Stormsurge, replace it with whatever it would have been, you're still losing the like 6 or 11 or 16 flat pen off of Luden's. And you're getting it back on Shadowflame, and then you're getting it back. Well, you're keeping it on Shadowflame, but you're getting it back partially on Stormsurge. So like, in actual practice, because of the Luden's nerf, if you're just gonna like replicate the build entirely, it's not like mages actually have more flat pen than before, which I think is actually like pretty smart, but it's good that they can get it back by choosing to buy the flat pen items, which I think is quite good. And of course, total ability power numbers are a bit higher. Total ability haste numbers are pretty similar, right? If your old build was, Shadowflame and Void Staff, they didn't have haste on those either, right? And if your build is Stormsurge into Void Staff or new Shadowflame into Void Staff, still no haste in that, right? So not that different there either. Just interesting thing to think about. Overall, though, like very clearly, this is the item that says, okay, well, as long as you can do this much damage, right, you have to personally deal a third of someone's health, which is going to be much harder to do against Ornn than against Ashe. But yeah, pretty big stuff. Actually, in my playtest game this morning, someone stole blue buff with Stormsurge because they killed my ally. Like I was trying to finish blue, and then, I think they killed my ally, and then it blew up and it stole blue, and I was like, okay, Sag, whatever. Anyway, yeah, cool item. This one has a fun story behind it. So it's old Hextech Rocketbelt. The designer who did the Mage update, or at least was in charge of it, was like, yeah, I just brought back Hextech Rocketbelt from the old pre-mythic version and then never retuned it. And if people say that Hextech Rocketbelt's underpowered, this means that items have been power crept. And so as far as I could tell, this is just like strictly exactly the old version of Rocketbelt from way back when. And just it's the same item. And was like, yeah, I'm not going to change that. Like this item's getting anchored in place because the item was fine back then. And if it's not fine now, we just have to make items weaker. And I thought that was actually smart. I'm actually a fan of that one. It's nice to put anchors in the ground once in a while and just be like, no, this is the pivot point of power level. And hopefully it can try to keep with that as well. We'll do the math real quick on the dash damage versus the Stormsurge damage. So here's Rocketbelt damage, and then here's Stormsurge damage. If you're a ranged champion, I want to point out that actually this is the more fair comparison for like LeBlanc or someone. So if you like 2.5x this, right? Like if we like compare, right, and we say, okay, how does Stormsurge compare to roughly Luden's proc? It's like, actually, yeah, it's in the ballpark, right? Just want to kind of bring up the numbers. Anyway, yeah. So Stormsurge for a ranged champion versus Rocketbelt. Actually, not that far off in damage. If you're melee, of course, if you're like a collie, guess what? It's better. But also, Rocketbelt can be maybe harness more often. It gives you some wave clear, whatever. Either way, item is pretty good. Health, ability, power, haste. Like it's a dash forward item, right? It's meant to be for tankier champions. I want to see if Mordekaiser ends up running this for just to get in range. I believe it might count as a unique spell effect for getting his passive. I'm actually not sure. I haven't played Rocketbelt Mordekaiser. But anyway, fun stuff overall though. I think it's a cool item to bring it back. And now that it's available to everyone, it's not gated by being a mythic. You might just see a lot more chances to pick this up, right? Might see a lot more chance to pick this up. One thing I do want to point out, by the way, with the Lost Chapter stuff here is these items are not mutually exclusive. You can stack all the Lost Chapter items together. You can buy both of these. You can buy Rod of Ages. You can buy Seraphs, and you can be a mana stacker for Rise and Cassidon and Co. Cosmic Drive back to the healthier version. I think this is kind of the better version of the item overall. Is to say, hey, repeated ability champions will tend to be the tankier ones. So this is more toward champs like Cassiopeia. It's probably not really the exactly greatest singed one, although maybe he's okay with the ability haste. I don't think it's really quite there. But Lily and Mordekaiser, I bought this item on them a little bit back when it was a health item. A season or so ago. I tend to like it. If I was like really snowballing on them, it would be like one of my greed AP purchases because it turns out if you're melee and have move speed, you like it a lot. So this item will always be a little bit niche. I think it'll always feel like a bit of a greed item unless we like really skew it towards health. If we size it the way we size things like, I don't know, Sterix Gauge, where it's like durability first and then it has some damage on it as well. But hopefully find some users. If not, right, we can always like move some numbers around and reshape it, make sure it's in a good spot. Haunted Guise goes back to the damage amp version of this. This is basically what Haunted Guise was before Mythic Update. This builds into new Liandry as well as the old Riftmaker or the new Riftmaker, whatever. So amp to Ruby Crystal plus some, like very standard stuff here. Pretty gold efficient looks like. 15 ability power, 50 health for 500 gold plus the passive. Totally reasonable item. So pretty efficient there. Alternator, pretty much the same item as before. It's back to double ability power, which honestly fits the whole idea of the item. I think this passive might be a little bit too strong, but whatever. It's certainly very, very good though. Hextech Alternator is a really, really good epic. I think it's valuable that epics are good, just not as good as legendaries. I think if the typical build on a wide number of champions is buy 3 epic items, we have overtuned epics. But if like various champions feel really good about certain epic spikes, then that's good. Like this was why I buffed Kerchai Shard and Recurve Bow back in 1310 was to like let champs feel good about hitting certain small power spikes. And with the mage items is kind of the case as well, right? Alternator's in a good spot, as well as you'll see with Verdant Barrier and Seeker's Arm Guard. I think I got into pretty good spots as well. So Alternator looks pretty strong. So Liandry's is no longer a Lost Chapter item. It is back to somewhat the old version. It is a sizable amount of ability power. It is a decent amount of health. It's not so much health that like Lysandra or Malzahar would feel bad about it, but it's not so much health that like it feels like a Zac item straight up. But they burn for 2% max health per second for 3 seconds. You get the somewhat shorter duration damage amp. Again, Liandry seems to be a little bit more skewed compared to Riftmaker toward squishier champions being able to buy it. So again, less power budget in the health, no Omnivamp. The ramp is done sooner. The ramp is done sooner. So all that kind of stuff here. Regardless, yep. It is a stack of ability power. It is a stack of health. It is mid-sized. You're paying, a fair bit of gold for the combine. But yeah, these are really good passives. And Liandry's good item, right? Good item, and the fact that Zac can buy it. Again, we saw Demonic Embrace split in 2. Demonic Burn version is this version of Liandry's, and Demonic's max health thing was Riftmaker, which just inherited that, as well as the Madness passive. So fun stuff there. Horizon Focus gets updated. Horizon Focus is inexpensive. It is cheap. You are not paying for health anymore. But this item is with a little bit of ability power. It's got a good amount of haste, though. Right? When you compare to other percent damage amp items, right? Shadowflame, which we'll look at later, but also Stormsurge. Those items don't have haste on them. So Horizon Focus is the one, like, not Lost Chapter percent damage amp item that has haste on it. So if you can apply this, hey, by the way, this is one of the only ways to get a percent damage amp and haste outside of going and spending on mana. So it's also inexpensive. 27 gold is pretty cheap for a Mage Legendary. Build path looks really nice. Solid amount of ability power, solid amount of haste. And then says, hey, by the way, deal 10% more damage, right? And by the way, a lot of the rules went away. When you deal damage with abilities to champs at a decent range. Now, 700 is slightly longer than Anti-Q, but it's like basically any skill shot. Like, I think even like max range Swain Q will apply this. Swain E is a freebie. Swain W is obviously a freebie. I think if they're, I don't know if Swain R quite reaches 700. Regardless, I don't know if it's a Swain item anyway, don't get me wrong. But also you've lost the slow condition, right? You can't just like buy Riley's and just have Horizon Focus work. So it's just like really simple. If they're long range, apply the thing. I'm a really big fan, and this actually was one of the goals of the update, was to just make things a bit more simple, make things a bit more straightforward, make things easier to understand. I think it was very smart, and I'm glad we're doing it here. And this is like, hey, here's a really simple rule. And then there's just like a cosmetic Mostly cosmetic, just sort of fun flavor thing to celebrate. Yes, you have applied the passive, you have done the thing. Let's remind you that you've in fact landed this effect, which is, hey, once every 30 seconds when you properly apply Hypershot, basically just Quinn W around the enemy. 1200 is slightly shy of Champion Vision range. I believe Champion Vision range is 1400. So you don't quite get as much vision as if you were to walk there yourself. Whatever, it's still 700 range beyond where you were, so you get at least 500 extra range of vision, in that direction. If I read this tooltip correctly, this is only reveal enemy champions, like will not reveal camps for you, but you can see if like, oh yeah, I landed a like Nidalee Javelin and then it lit up the Baron pit, and I know that there's a bunch of people in Baron, or there's not, or the jungler's behind them, there's someone waiting in the brush, right? I know we can chase. All that stuff can be pretty valuable, right? You can get some kind of cool stuff here. So hopefully we'll see. I think this is really, really good in terms of like making the item feel like it's doing something. Horizon Focus has been a strong item for a while and under-purchased for its power level. Ziggs and Xerath and Vel'Koz, Horizon Focus is their optimal second item, and a lot of players don't buy it because it's just not as obviously good as stats like a Magic Pen or whatnot. And so simplifying it down, but then having a nice visual sweetener can help be like, hey, this item is good. You should really consider it. I also want to do some math real quick. So Horizon Focus. Let's talk about how much Magic Pen Horizon Focus's damage amp is worth. Because that is one thing that I think can be easily overlooked. Is like, and to be fair, like most people aren't going to have 40. I'm probably going to have more than this. But doing just 10% more damage straight up is worth 13 to, and this is, people can be higher than this even, but worth 13 to 28 flat Magic Pen, right? If your target's resulting MR after Void Staff and Sorc Shoes and whatever else is on this table, here is how much flat pen the unique passive on this item is worth. And it's like, hey, guess what? This is more than Stormsurge. It's more than Shadowflame. Now, Stormsurge and Shadowflame have other damage increases elsewhere on the thing, so this is not completely apples to apples, but it is still directionally like, yeah, this is a pretty good line of text. It's a pretty good amount of damage, right? Okay, on to some of the epics that are updated. Seeker's Arm Guard is more expensive, no longer has a stacking mechanic, just simply gives you the one-time stopwatch. Seeker's Arm Guard is now where stopwatch lives. The only item this builds into is Zhonya's. It doesn't go to GA. The rune for stopwatch is gone, so look, if you want to get a one-time Zhonya's, you can go buy a 600 gold Seeker's Arm Guard if you want, and you can do it, and you can go all the way to Zhonya's if you really want. Sure, have fun if that's what you want to do, but this is the result, right? This is what's happening. You get a one-time arm guard that turns into a broken arm guard that you can finish it in Zhonya's, whatever. We can do the math real quick on gold efficiency. The old arm guard, if you fully stacked it, right, was quite gold efficient. If you didn't have it fully stacked, it was still fine. Right, the item was meant to be good. I buffed it a little while ago. But then now the item is technically not gold efficient, but of course it comes with stasis, so obviously this item is very good, right? 92% gold efficiency going into stasis. Considering that stopwatch itself was like, what, 650 for just stasis? You're only really paying 100 for just stasis, which is very, very good. So yeah, strong item, obviously, but only built on a Zhonya, so you're going to finish the item. Cryptbloom is a side grade to Void Staff. It is less Magic Pen and less ability power, but it has some ability haste and a team amp heal. Now, again, think about a typical build. You're going to build this third or fourth, so you're probably at 300 ability power or so at this point in time, at least 250. And so, 125 plus 50, 175. Great. You have a once per team fight, moderate-sized heal going to your squad. Interesting, neat, right? A takedown within some time of damaging them. So the interesting thing is I can't see any heal and shield power champions wanting percent pen. I can't see like a Sona or Soraka or Janna wanting this as like her fourth item. Maybe you could argue this is like correct on someone like Zyra, where it's their best percent damage amp still because they want ability haste for CEC. They want Magic Pen because, they are hitting frontline with plants and Liandry's burn or whatever. But the big thing is really just, you know what? We're going to just have a more supportive output, maybe. I could see it. It's interesting. It's definitely a side grade. I mean, we'll see who's really wanted to buy it, but this item has felt pretty powerful when my teammates buy it. I'm happy that I get healed once in my team fights. Like, it is not a bad item. It's just like, hey, I'm just very curious if people are going to choose to be selfless. Because my instinct is like people are not going to choose to be selfless. Even this item is very good, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. So Shadowflame is a big ticket 3,200 gold item. Again, I'm going to compare it to Rise of Focus. 500 gold difference is a very, very big deal. 120 ability power is, of course, a lot. 10 magic pen is good, but not as good as 10% more damage. But, of course, what's really, really nice is, hey, let's say you're solo killing someone, right? You're doing all the damage yourself. Well, for a third of your damage, you're doing 20% more damage, which is about you do 7% more damage, right? This line of text reads roughly deal 7 to 10 or so % more damage if you're solo killing people. If you are doing the early damage, aka you're a poke mage, you're playing Xerath, Ziggs, Lux, it's entirely possible that Lux ult hits someone at 40% health and you just don't get the Shadowflame text, right? And it, puts them to 10%, or maybe it kills them, or whatever, who knows. But it's nice because this helps differentiate it from Horizon Focus by saying, if you're doing the damage late, okay, now it is going to be really, really good. And especially like someone like Malzahar, right? It's like, if you're Malzahar, like, the nice thing about your dots is they're very likely to stick on people for the end of it. And the nice thing is, in fact, the damage amp is even increased for them. So dot mages should actually really, really like Shadowflame. And especially, like, based on the kind of dot mage you are, it's entirely possible that, like, you would be overcapping your dots anyway. So, like, for example, Lilia doesn't really need ability haste because it's pretty trivial to, like, have 100% uptime with your Q on her passive. And she'd kind of just like rather have Shadowflame to like start having just better dot damage, doing all the damage anyway, and just having like Liandry's and Shadowflame just like deal the damage, and 30% more to someone who's low. And in fact, like, Lily is often not the one dealing damage first. Mordekaiser is often not the one dealing damage first. Now, those items have any health on it, so good luck feeling good about buying some Mordekaiser. Yikes. 300 gold on no durability is a tough one, but if you're able to like always go for the Jhin or something, and someone already chunked him because like, I don't know, Karthus ults and then you come in, I don't know, I can see it. Or maybe it is like, actually no, you're gonna Karthus ult people who are low, and I'm gonna make sure that I land like a really good Karthus chunk. Yeah, you're gonna get that here, right? So you can get a lot for sure. There's definitely some value here, but yeah, you have to kind of think about like what kind of champion you are and when you're dealing your damage. Amp Tome is cheaper. Congratulations, 400 gold Amp Tome. In order to keep the hierarchy of more expensive components are better, Blasting Wand gets 5 gold, or 5 AP to be gold efficient, and then NLR gets 10 AP to be more gold efficient than Amplifying Tome. This I want to point out, by the way, is why gold efficiency is a fake stat. Because if you do just derived gold efficiency, this line has nerfed every mage item in the game. Suddenly every mage item is like 10% less gold efficient from ability power, despite the fact that mages clearly got strictly buffed by having cheaper components. Gold efficiency is kind of a fake stat. It's like reasonably okay at comparing apples to apples. If you're like, hey, I'm comparing, I don't know, Trinity Force to Stridebreaker. One has more AD, one has more health, one has more attack speed, one has more gold cost. As long as I like all three stats reasonably well, and I can compare the gold efficiencies, like, oh, they're pretty close together. Or, wow, one is far better than the other. Okay, that's probably pretty good. But if you're like, how good are mage items compared to AD items? It's like, no, that's useless. Like, don't. Just like, you can't do that. So that's why gold efficiency is kind of a fake stat. Just kind of bring that up. Let's move on. So Zhonya's Hourglass gets upsized. One of, I know, the goals of the Mage project was to have more 100 ability power items. The goal is that if you have a really, really, really full build, you can get 1,000 AP. I was actually watching some of the Champions Queue EU in-house games. I don't remember the player, but someone was like, wait a second, you don't have boots anymore? He's like, yeah, I have 1,000 AP. It's good for the dopamine. Because he had like Death Cap, 20 stack Magi's in a full build. Otherwise, he had 1,000 AP on like not Vagar. And literally the line was like, someone was like, oh no, boots isn't good? He's like, 1,000 AP is good for the dopamine. And I'm like, nice. This is like exactly the goal. I tried to tell the designer that. He's like, yeah, that's what I wanted. So yeah, 4 digits, one comma in there for the mages is definitely an intended goal here. And so yeah, there's a bunch of like 100 plus AP items. So yeah, Zhonya's Hourglass gets grown. It's much bigger. It's interesting actually seeing the sort of choice here, because you can see here like a Banty Veil got more expensive as well. So part of the changes here are that instead of the defensive legendaries being cheap and easy to access, like, oh, I'm a mage, I'm losing, let me get my defensive legendary online so I can stop dying so fast. It seems like the point here is instead saying, actually, the defensive epics are going to be good, but they're still going to upgrade into like full-sized legendaries. And I actually think I like that shape more. I think it's actually an intelligent choice to say that, hey, there are good reactive epics, and then they're just like normal sized or large sized even legendaries, I think is pretty smart. So I'm kind of a fan of that shape for stuff. As long as you're willing to give someone a good, like, high quality defensive epic, which, like, you might be, there could be very good reasons to want to be afraid of good epic components, because, right, if defensive epics are too good, optimal play turns into you always rushing that item and sitting on it, and then there's no longer any kills in highly skilled games. And pro play is already the sort of like level of play where we actually like it to be more bloody, and then solo queue we can have it be less lethal. But pro players are the only ones willing to buy defensive items, kind of thing. So it's tough to do that one correctly, because any opt-in defenses is always going to be used better by people who already play in games where there aren't enough kills. Challenger players as well to a certain degree, but like still. So that's a tough thing, but I still think the shape like makes sense in terms of like being attractive to players. So, the new sized Zhonya's Hourglass, right? More expensive, more ability power, more armor, less ability haste. So, let's talk about gold efficiency. Comparing apples to apples, right? The item to the item. You get the same stasis, and wow, this item goes for 102% gold efficient plus stasis to 111% gold efficient plus stasis. Assuming you value ability haste at this much gold, assuming you actually think 40 ability power. And by the way, my gold efficiency, I am using the old ability power numbers because I think it would be very silly to like pretend that 14-1 items are weaker because Amp Tome got cheaper. I will redo this and update the numbers again to do different apples to apples after this one, 14-2 and onwards. Actually, one of the weird things about gold efficiency is like technically, if we're gonna consider the AP conversion is worth 10% less than before, then actually 80% of this gold is actually 70%, and so the gold efficiency is lower. But like the gold efficiency is 103% if you think that ability power is only worth 20 gold each and not 23 gold each, right? Or 22 or whatever it was. So stuff there, but yeah, I mean, obviously Zhonya is a very, very good item. It's a big stack of ability power, good stack of armor, and whatnot. So yeah, strong item. Banshee's Veil gets grown up as well to be a very, very similar size. You can see it's a little bit cheaper than Zhonya's Hourglass, but same 120 AP, same 50 resists. Astral has the spell shield. Alongside it, though, is Verdant Barrier also gets grown to the side to the size of Arm Guard. A large stack of ability power, decent size of MR. You no longer get the MR stacking per kill, I believe, but you actually get the Banshee's Veil shield on Verdant Barrier. This is the cheapest source of spell shield in the game, outside of just like playing Sivir or Nocturne or something, which is a pretty big deal. So we can talk about the Banshees and the Verdant Barrier gold efficiencies here, right? So Banshee's Veil was already pretty gold efficient and then had a null. Again, gold efficiency arguably is up, though keep in mind, right, it's a bigger item by a large amount. Depends how much you think the ability haste is worth, if you think it's the same number or not. MR, obviously a pretty valuable stat, but yeah, this item looks obviously quite good. Also keep in mind that, like, in actuality, I'm pretty sure I would rather have a stasis active than a 30-second cooldown spell shield. So, arguably, Zhonya's is a better item, but again, Banshee's is cheaper. And I also want to point out one thing, that in a world where you are taking enough magic damage to want to buy MR, actually taking half magic damage, half physical damage, the fact that champions have less magic resist than armor makes every point of MR worth more than each point of armor. Again, assuming you're actually taking equal amounts of damage coming in. If you're not taking equal amounts of damage coming in, and you tend to take more physical damage than magic damage, by the way. Minions and turrets and whatnot exist. Epic monsters tend to deal physical damage, etc., etc. But in a world where you really are taking this much damage, then guess what? This item is actually even more efficient. Verdant Barrier technically does lose some gold efficiency. You are clearly paying for the annul, but like, okay, that's fine. It's still quite good, right? And regardless, it's still just a component. Who cares? If we wanted to say, hey, the unstacked item is 90% gold efficient, and the unstacked item is 80% gold efficient plus Banshee's passive, like, seems pretty good, right? I'm not saying this item is cracked. I don't think it's necessarily as good as Hexdrinker. I think Hexdrinker is an incredibly good item, but whatever. Archangel gets some level of update. Want to point out there was no longer any health in it. So yes, plus 10 AP. Yes, plus 10 ability haste. Yes, plus 100 mana. I believe this is the same Awe passive of just getting this. Mana charge is, I thought it was 3 and 6, 6 and 12. It's 5 now. I don't remember Archangel staff being 5 and 10. So, hey, looks like it's higher. Wow, I really can't remember. I bought tier recently. Whatever. Either way, yeah, losing some health, but gaining, basically much more damage. And I think charging faster is yeah, definitely going to be interesting. Definitely going to be kind of neat. It's a really big stick of mana. Seraph's Embrace, still no health on it either. A little bit more mana, again, more ability power, more ability haste. Like, Mage items are losing a lot of durability on them and gaining a lot of other stuff. Now, again, there are the other options, right? If Merchmaker's good, if Rocketbelt's good, if everything else is good, then there are options that have durability on them. If Banshees and Zhonyas feel good, you still have, other durability options as well. But this does mean that, like, a lot of the core Mage items no longer have health on them. Like, the stuff that you just kind of build on its own, like, Rise was, like, always go Seraphs. Custom was always go Seraphs. They no longer just, like, automatically get health in these builds as a result. Like, they might have to go for Roa or something and opt into the healthier items, or they might buy the other Lost Chapter items. Like, I can imagine Kassadin would probably just buy Cryptbloom. Cryptbloom? No. Malignance? The one where you burn people every ulti. Like, probably does that every time. You still get the Lifeline shield, though, on Seraph, so there is still a durability output, but it's not Lifeline plus health. Rapid Death Cap gets grown to account for the needs of large rods in the build path. Instead of 60 each to 70 each, this going down by 5% is because there's more AP in any given item. Mathematically, this kind of lines up with what you expect to have happened, right? The more ability power you have, the more a percent ability power amp is a overall damage amp, so makes sense. Should still be a pretty decent item. Much to say here. Voice Staff gets grown up to 3,000 gold. This does mean Cryptbloom is, I believe, 150 gold cheaper at 2850. It gets 15 AP for 200 gold. That is a buff, because this would cost 300 gold or so. So Void Staff is just a better item, although it does take longer to get online, which can certainly matter here. Still, though, yeah, solid item. Rod of Ages gets cheaper. Keep in mind, this is a mythic demotion, so it's going to be losing power here. Rod of Ages gets cheaper by 200 gold. It loses 10 AP. Okay, that's a wash already, but it loses 100 mana and 50 health on top. So downgrade, loses the mythic passive of free ability haste, and it loses the randomly applied move speed whenever restoring health or mana. What's nice, though, is this definitely helps to simplify the item. It just, here we go. It stacks and gives you stats and a level. It restores some mana and health from the Catalyst passive. It's reasonably gold efficient. That's fine. It's a much simpler item on the tin. That's good overall. Does what it's supposed to do. Okay, great. Catalyst gets a little bit nicer since the item is expensive. I think this is a balancing lever against the fact that Lost Chapter is still probably the best epic item in the game. And so this one looks a little bit nicer by comparison. Okay, great. Sure. Lich Bane gets a lot nicer. 100 gold for 15 AP is very, very good. That's obviously a very large upgrade. This would cost 300 gold normally, so that's a big deal. Keep in mind that directly feeds into the unique passive of the item, so you're getting another, 7.5 damage on the pop, and an additional, 10 or so damage from the 75% base AD being 100% base AD on the Sheen pop, and you get bonus attack speed on the Spale Blade. So gold efficiency on the base stats are up. Proc damage is up. Proc damage is up because of the AP increase and attack speed on the thing. Huge increase to Lich Bane. Much stronger item. Lich Bane has been good for a while. It's a really good Victor item. It's a really good Echo item. Echo does buy it, to be fair. Evelyn buys it. She knows it's good. But Lich Bane, I think, should be looking really, really good next patch. Another item with 3 digits on the ability power. That should feel nice as well. Yeah, I think this item is going to look really, really, really good. Nasser's Tooth just gets a little bit downsized. 200 gold for 10 AP is a very fine trade. One thing I do want to point out is that because legendary items are very good, and oftentimes while you're buying them are for the unique passives, anytime an item gets shrunk at 100% gold efficiency is a buff to the item, right? If this item, like, imagine this item, let's say another 80 ability power got taken off. And what would 80 ability power cost? It would cost what? 4 amp tomes, so 600 gold. If this item cost 1,400 gold and gave you 10 ability power, 15 haste, 50 attack speed, and a Cathian bite, this item would be broken, right? And so, like, this doesn't look like a buff on, like, that big of a buff on paper, or maybe even like a buff on paper, but, like, this is linearly scaling towards this item being the best item in the game. We're not going to go to this item being 2,000 gold, don't get me wrong, but, like, this is a buff at being cheaper in a 1-to-1 gold ratio. This item is very good. Also want to point out, actually, a very specific thing, which is this means that Kaisa can no longer evolve her W off just Nasser's Tooth. She either has to go for a Dark Seal, which she can, that's fine, or she has to, like, get Rageblade online first or something like that, or, buy an Amp Tome right afterwards towards her next item, right? The Amp Tome or Blasting Wand or whatever that would go into Rageblade. Merlinomicon is basically split between where old Merlinomicon was and the support one, which is Chemtech Putrefier. This is meant to be the catch-all generic AP Grievous Wounds item. That's it. Just easy to look at, easy to purchase. Everyone can feel good about it. 90 ability power, pretty solid. 15 ability haste, mid-sized. We're trying to, put mid-sized haste items at 15. We're trying to put big haste items at 25. Right, no more magic pen, no more health, just very simple. AP and haste, not much to say here, except the fact that, hey, this item is actually quite gold efficient, right? 108% gold efficient, AP and haste plus Grievous Wounds. Reasonable item. You can feel okay building it on Sona, on Janna, on Melio, on Orianna, and whatever. It's fine. It's totally reasonable. You would rather have Horizon Focus for having more gold for like a bigger damage amp and whatnot, like if you're just going for selfless damage, but like it's a totally fine item with solid stats on it. All right, let's move on to Fighter and Diver items. Gore Drinker is gone. Divine Sunderer is gone. The Fighter QSS, which was the least built item in the game, is gone. And there's no longer Iron Spike Whip because Tiamat is becoming the active item. So it's just, really, this is actually Tiamat has become Iron Spike Whip, kind of. Well, they're kind of combining. Whatever, who cares? So first up is a Hullbreaker redesign. Rectrix is attack damage plus move speed. Tunneler is Phage without any unique effects on it. It's just attack damage, health, and that's it. It's like kind of old Jorm's Fist in a way. So it is still attack damage, health, and move speed. You no longer get a bunch of bonus resists when you are alone. You still give some extra durability to Siege and Super Minions to make them powerful. But what you gain instead is a bunch of damage against champions, against epic monsters, and a lot of bonus damage against turrets. So let's do the math on the passive, basically. So this is, if I am a generic, like, champion, and I have, some AD, whatever, and I have some health because I'm, like, building fighter items, and I auto you 5 times, what is my average auto per hit before? And then with the unique passive of Hullbreaker, and so my champion epic monster auto attack DPS is up around 20%. This is not counting Sheen, and we can get rid of the first like 5 or 6 levels, right? Because we're obviously not going to have that happen. But it's like, yeah, I'm going to get, if we're not counting Sheen, if I'm not playing an AD carry, so I'm not critting, if I'm actually have some bonus health here because I'm like playing a fighter, mid-sized fighter build, like, okay, I have like 20% more auto-attack damage against champions. That's actually pretty good. 20% more auto-attack damage against champions is totally, totally solid. Against structures, it's like 40-50% more damage. Now, if you're not buying this first and you're buying it, level 11, you're buying it second, maybe you're buying it third around level 13, 14, 15. Now, to be fair though, this is still more damage than Old Hullbreaker gave. Old Hullbreaker just said deal 20% more damage to structures. Now, if any of your abilities like Camille Q or Fiora Q or Sheen's, apply the turrets, then hey, this is going to be meaning less and less. Trundle Q works on turrets and gives him bonus AD. Bonus AD does not apply to this. It is base AD. So all the really good split pushes aren't really being quite this strong with it, but like it's not that far off. It is probably stronger, don't get me wrong. This is probably still more than Old Hullbreaker in terms of your damage to structures, but you're also not getting 60 bonus armor and MR, and you're also not getting the health regen anymore, and so all that stuff. I also really like that there's no longer a hunting alone mechanic. Obviously, this item is still about split pushing. It helps you kill epic monsters. It helps you kill turrets. Like it buffs minions to make them more durable so that they can siege better. Like it still is flavored toward split pushing, absolutely. But this item doesn't turn off when team fighting, which I think is a very big improvement, and I'm a really big fan of this redesign. Blade of the Ruin King, very similar item to before, 40 AD, 25 AS. I believe this is less lifesteal. I could be wrong about that one. Fairly similar damage numbers before. The big change, though, is there is no longer a 3-hit passive with a damage bump. It is your first attack applies a slow for 1 second. You don't get a move speed yourself. You don't apply a burst of damage by autoing 3 times. It is just if you autoed once, there you go. You can stick to them. This actually ends up skewing it, I would say, toward melee champions, because if you can land one auto, you're now guaranteed to land the rest. That actually makes it very, very easy for Aurelia to say hit confirm her slow into the stun. Because one auto into E2, it's basically have a blink or take the stun. So it still feels like a very good Aurelia item, of course. But yeah, just, hey, here's the item. Seems decent. Phage, pretty similar to before, but now this has the move speed on hit passive instead of the regen one. So simplification there, arguably. Eclipse has been very much just moved toward being a fighter item. So it's attack damage, it's ability haste. There's no health on it, right? There's no lifesteal on it, which is like how old Eclipse was as well. But no lethality. right? Inexpensive. It's a legendary, right? So 2800 gold legendary. So very cheap, very easy to get online. It still has the 2-hit deal damage amp, 2-hit get a shield. But hey, it's a stack of attack damage, ability haste, and some burst damage, and a decent sized shield, kind of like Seraph's Embrace, right? There's no baseline health, but there is a shield sometimes. Like this is a very solid light fighter item that has some durability that will scale a little bit with what you're buying. 200, 300 bonus AD is not unreasonable. Very very late game, so you can not quite double the size of the shield, but a decent amount of extra shield here. Sphere of Shoujo gets redesigned into still being the big ability haste item. I think that is correct, right? This is 35 non-ulti ability haste. The redesign here on being just simplified is just way better. I think this is just correct here. 300 gold, right? It's within a reasonable price point here. Pickaxe, Kindle Gem, Coalfield's Warhammer, right? Like very reasonable sized components, pretty easy to buy. A lot of attack damage, some health, not a small amount of health, but this does put Shojin back towards being aggressively shaped. When I did redesigns on it, or when I updated it late last year, I moved it towards being more durable, towards fitting a Xin or Vi shaped champion who's going to be in the front lines taking a lot of damage. This makes it a little bit squishier. We'll see if this will be the right shape for it or not. It's fine. We can always retune numbers around as needed. It's not a problem. But yeah, 35 ability haste for non-ultis is great. Making it just much more simplified is great. Instead of the weird move speed that's missing health is, hey, you have a scaling % damage amp. So this item is very, very aggressive, right? It's 300 health and then a damage stat, arguably a damage stat, arguably a damage stat, and directly a damage stat. So Shojin is very, very high damage. It's very, very good. If you happen to apply a lot of spell damage, hey, you're and you're just a full squishy damage champion, well, you're only really paying a little bit of durability, paying a little bit for durability, and the rest of it's damage. So good looking item. Ravenous Hydra no longer has the stacking paradigm. It has some attack damage, has some ability haste, has some lifesteal, and guess what? It has the old passive cleave, though this is attacks only. No longer applies on ZQ and ZE. Goodbye to that one. But it does have the active crescent to do 100% total attack damage to nearby enemies, and it applies lifesteal as it did before as well. So yep, good old Ravenous Hydra with the team active is back. Titanic Hydra is losing the health conversion passive. It's just simply a bunch of attack damage and a bunch of health. So this is very, very large sized. But then, hey, if you have the auto attack, the auto attacks are dealing % max health damage, dealing about 1/4 less if you are a ranged champion. It does an amount of on-hit damage baseline, and then it does a much larger amount of on-hit damage in the cone. If you activate the active, it does more damage here. Let's do the numbers real quick. Titanic Hydra. This is the on-hit damage off of this is 15 or 1600 total bonus health. It's not a ton of bonus health on a generic fighter, but still scaling to 60, 70 on-hit damage is quite good. This is hit 2. This is the cone damage. The cone damage is obviously quite nice. So yeah, Titanic Hydra, if you buy it, first or whatever, you're getting 100 damage per auto attack to the minions that aren't the one you're hitting. And of course, the minion you are hitting, right, you have 55 AD plus your base AD is 70 at this point. Plus the on-hit damage, you're doing 150 to the one you're hitting, and you're doing another 90 to these behind it. This is good wave clear. It's very strong. And if you use the active, you're doing extra, 90 to 100 to 200 damage on the one you're hitting, and a decent size 2 to 3 to 400 point cone behind it. So pretty solid as well. Equivalent to a rank 1 spell with some gold scaling behind it. So you're not getting you're not getting extra AD. So Scion isn't printing 100 attack damage as the item anymore from all the extra health he was getting, but still, of course, a good item it looks like. Teammate gets the active back. Congratulations. Hearthbound Axe gets shrunk down basically to just be 2 daggers and a longsword. Just its stats, that's it. Stridebreaker gets demythicked. So, decent amount of health, decent amount of attack damage, a little bit of attack speed. Active no longer deals damage, but it does give you move speed. As a Nocturne enjoyer, I am sad to lose an item that kills small Krugs for me. I often don't have my pass available, and this wastes 3 autos. I'm very sad. I gave feedback as a Nocturne player. I was man, I'm really missing the damage here. And it's it's not what the item's doing. It's understandable, just for champions that I play. I'm this is something I care about. Oh well. But this gets the Phage passive of move speed when dealing damage, and of course you get the move speed as well when you use the active here. So this is about the CC and the movement. Of course, again, you're losing the mythic passive here. You are losing the active having damage on it, which is of course powered down as well. But yep, Stridebreaker is there. It's got good stats and it's got a slow attached to it. It's there to help you stick to targets, and it's just got stats otherwise. Seems like a normally sized legendary, you know? New item alert, experimental hexplate. Yeah, Tunneler is, again, just attack damage plus health. It's phage without the passive on it. Noon Quiver. So there's actually an interesting, like a Noon Quiver item that is going towards fighters here. Right? It's the first health Noon Quiver item, unless Triforce is getting it, which I think might be true. We'll look at it later. Regardless, attack damage, ability, attack speed, health, ton of ulti ability haste. There's no haste on it otherwise, so like you are buying this only for the ulti haste. That's interesting, right? It kind of stands out. And a 30 ulti haste is quite a lot. You can't get more ulti haste in the fighter system than this, so it really stands out. But it's like otherwise it's about auto attackers and it's about auto attacking, but it's like, oh no, I'm playing, Vi or Nocturne or Sinjao or something, and I want this big stack of stats once I'm done casting the ulti. I believe this was special cased to only apply the buff after finishing things like Nocturne ulti. I don't know if every single champ got special cased who works like this, but I am pretty sure Nocturne and Vi got it. I think Rek'Sai got it as well. I could be wrong, but essentially, I know the designer did try to make sure this item worked like correctly for the optimal champions. So this is like, yeah, my combat pattern is I ult and then fight. And so it's really, really good for, 50% bonus boost speed for 7 seconds is quite a lot. This is like a very meaningful amount. So, it's a 55% attack speed, 50% move speed, 30 ulti ability haste. Like, if your goal is to ult and then fight people, it's really good for that. You're not getting the Stridebreaker slow, but you are getting more Nocturne ultis, and you're going to keep up with them. So, pretty good stuff, right? So we have another tunneler item, which is Sundered Sky. So it's just, hey, here's a generic, right, attack damage health item. We don't want to put move speed on everything. You add Call of Field's Warhammer. It's, hey, look, similar size, right? 55 AD, 300 health, 15 haste. Generic haste, a multi haste. No attack speed here, but this kind of has a Divine Sunderer-like pattern. It's more of a Jarvan passive thing, right? Where first hit every, I think it's 6 or 10 seconds. I forget exactly. But basically that attack critically strikes. Okay, great. You get your extra damage. And you heal for a bit, right? Like the highest base hit you're going to see in the game is like, 60 at level 1, like 140 at level 18. So like that's not a, trivial amount. Like, it's 100 something heal, 200 or so heal at level 18. Basically missing health, right? If you're missing 3,000 health, that's another, 18? 180, yeah. So you can get like 180, right, for the missing health. You can get, 180 from the base AD. Like you can get 300 point heal, right? If you run around and go bonk, 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 you can get 300 points. You can get 300, 300, 300 if you go around and hit people. Like this keeps up, right? If you're a very healthy champion, right, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna keep putting Sterak's Gauge and Titanic Hydra and these health items so that like if I'm missing 2,000 health, I'm not instantly dead. Okay, right, like, I think the levers are correct, right? Base AD, missing health. This says, like, okay, it's not going to lane sustain you a lot early game, right? Like, I have to auto you, but the cooldown is arguably longer than Divine Sunder would have been. The healing is a bit lower. The damage amp is not, nearly as egregious as Divine Thunder, I think. You're doing, I guess, to be fair, that you're doing 175% total AD, which is quite good. Like, that is a very good Sheen proc, at least they're not scaling off opponent champion health, right? But yeah, it's a solid item. This item is very good, right? Bought this item a lot. Feels really good on fighters. It feels like a really good first item power spike from my experience. So here's Tunneler, generic, attack damage health, great, easy stuff. Steel Sigil, attack damage armor, also easy stuff, great. Wit's End is getting reshaped a little bit. It is getting smaller. It's getting cheaper. It's getting easier to buy. The attack damage is gone, which is interesting to me. It certainly says, this basically declares who it's for, right? It says, okay, you are not spell-based. You are an auto-attacker. We're looking at, Viego, Irelia type champions, not, Darius type champions. Of course, it makes it even nicer on Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw doesn't care about his AD. He cares about the attack speed. But it's like, okay, right, it's more about target resists. It's more attack speed. We're like really going in on it being a skirmisher style item, attack speed style item. Obviously, like you're not getting more damage by losing 40 AD, getting 15 AS, but hey, 400 gold, pays for 10 AD in the first place. Arguably more like, 12 to 15, because I talked about, going down linearly. You get pay for another, 10 AD or so with the attack speed. Maybe you pay for another 10 AD with a 10 MR. Arguably, around there. And then the big thing is this item has 20 tenacity on it. That's the really big thing, is that, hey, if you want to buy a skirmisher item with tenacity, you can opt into Wit's End and say, wow, as Master Yi, I'm getting just absolutely turbo screwed by Lissandra or whatever. I can buy a tenacity item that I feel good about. And that's the real upshot here, is like, hey, we're letting you buy tenacity as a stat. there's another one later on with Steric's Gauge where it's like, you can go buy Tenacity now. This is now a thing. And so, yeah, like, this would be a nerf on its own, of course, but this is a pretty big deal. And so, we'll see what happens here, but this is definitely pretty meaningful, right? You're not allowed to buy Tenacity in more than just Merc Treads. So next up, we get Trinity Force in here. It is indeed not building out of Noon Quiver. It's Hearthbound Axe, Sheen, Phage, Hearthbound Axe. We are keeping, the move speed. It's now called Quicken, okay, whatever. But the big nerf here is the Mythic Passive, which is actually one of the better ones. Trinity Force has a really good Mythic Passive. But it's also losing the Threefold Strikes, which is the up to 18% more base attack damage, or 18% base attack damage as bonus AD is going away. Now, that is a pretty meaningful thing because it means you're deleting up to, like, 18 to sometimes even 30, not quite 30, actually pretty close to 30, attack damage off the item in some cases. You're actually getting 5 back anyway, but the Mythic Passive, again, is a pretty big downgrade. I think it's, 3 attack damage, 3 ability haste, and 3 move speed, I think. Like, quite meaningful, because 3 move speed is 1% move speed, which is, like, not a bad stat. So Mythic Passive down, again, one of the better Mythic Passives. Attack damage is overall down despite this. All that said, though, like, this is very good. Like, Trinity Force is still looking like one of the strongest items in the game. This item is looking really, really, really nice. Of course, any Divine Center users are going to lose the heal and move the Triforce, and I think it'll still feel pretty good. But yeah, pretty meaningful update here. Black Cleaver is getting 100 gold cheaper, is losing 10 ability haste. We are shrinking ability haste in the game overall. I do think, though, and we've actually seen it with the other fighter items, is that, like, I think fighters are the class that is most deserving of ability haste being a core stat for them. I held that pretty strongly. I, sort of pushed for that as we were doing these updates. And yeah, try to keep ability haste, like, relatively high in the fighter ecosystem. Anyway, yeah, so Black Cleaver, good amount of health, 400, good amount of AD, 55, good amount of ability haste, and 20. Like, this is higher than most other legendaries give ability haste. Now, I want to point out that the shred is actually going down somewhat to compensate for, I guess, the item being cheaper. I mean, Black Cleaver, to be fair, was arguably overpowered. One of the very most bought items in the game, was a pretty ubiquitous fighter item. This basically, so I have 2 thoughts about this. So one, I liked fighters having good percent shred because it meant that part of the power budget of fighters could be less about, like, one-shotting people and burst people, and it could be more about, oh, they're really good supplemental frontliners because even if they're not as tanky as tanks, they also make tanks less tanky, and so they can help, just by Renekton existing, he can help you kill Ornn or Malphite faster by going Cleaver and using some form of shred, like, Renekton has it on his kit, for example. And I thought that was, like, it's a pretty good way of saying, okay, well, fighters can be, like, complementary damage sources while also being complementary tanks. And that's, like, pretty useful or whatnot, right? They can peel sometimes, they can frontline a little bit, they can do okay here. On the other hand, though, by having a bunch of shred, especially in an item that is always purchased, basically, Black Cleaver, again, one of the most purchased items in the game, it means that tanks are just, like, always kind of screwed. And tanks just always feel bad trying to tank physical damage. And so Black Cleaver being less strong makes tanks be able to feel better about their 1v1s, right? No Divine Sunder, Black Cleaver being worse, tanks can feel better about 1v1ing top laners for a larger portion of the game because they're not getting just screwed by every item they're getting purchased by, right? Move speed actually a little bit higher on Black Cleaver, and it relies on the number of carve stacks. Okay, great. Steric's Gauge is the other item getting flat tenacity onto it. This is actually my suggestion. Actually came in really late. We added this in, like, December. But I was like, actually, if we're letting people buy tenacity, I think it would be worth it to put it on Steric's Gauge, because Steric's Gauge right now only actually has one, like, stat, because it has health, and then the bonus attack damage is a unique passive, and the shield's unique passive. So when you look at Steric's Gauge, you're like, oh, this only gives one stat. This item kind of sucks. And just even having a second stat is kind of nice. I could even see Steric's Gauge, like, just existing as an item that just had an amount of attack damage on it as well, instead of going with base AD. I think it's fine as it is in terms of, like, this is a good mechanic. But in terms of, like, the item reading as good, it just, like, having lines of text can help, like, the item, like, look like it's good. But regardless, basically, the shield is still 80% bonus health. Decaying over 4.5 seconds, you gain size for 8 seconds. The amount of size is lower, instead of 25, it's 10%. But instead of, situational 30 tenacity for a duration, you just get permanent 20 tenacity. And so Steris Gauge, of course, a much nicer looking item. Instead of the old Phage, of course, you're getting new Tunneler, but still Pickaxe and Ruby Crystal, right? All that's kind of the same. Yeah, a little bit less health, but more tenacity. Same attack damage, and then, overall, like, this is like a better item, right? Permanent tenacity is obviously very, very good. So Steris Gauge, bam, it's in there. But a lot of the reasons items are going to be good is if you have good base attack damage, so you're not Belveth, and you have enough bonus health that the shield is good, because otherwise, like, this shield just kind of sucks, right? It's a 320 point decaying shield. That's worse than Hexdrinker. Like, if you're just like Master Yi and you want a way to not get killed by Malzahar, it's easily Maw, and it's easily, Wit's End if it's Lysandra or something, to like coincide with it. Steris Gauge is definitely for the champions who are building the bonus health items. Then we move on to tank and support items. I think there's some really, really cool stuff here. So first up, we finally have the Moon Ice Apron. We have a magic resist Sunfire Cape. Now, the burn damage is lower. Sunfire's base burn damage is, I believe, 20. Also, Sunfire can get a 60% damage amp by being in combat. This one doesn't have that. Instead, we have Corpse Explode. So when things die, they blow up, dealing damage around it. It's not based on your target's max health. You can't convert it to fire damage and scale it with crit or anything, but you can deal a decent amount of damage. You can scale it off your bonus health. It's got a decent flat amount. It's just twice as much as this thing. Now, let's be clear. The total like explode damage is like about as good as Sunfire's damage per tick when fully amped. Like, it's not extreme, but it is nice when you're like, okay, well, I have almost enough to clear the wave, and it's like, all right, we'll have to clear the wave, as the minis explode. So it is nice. It is some cool stuff here. It feels good. It's pretty inexpensive. It's a good stat line. So you got some health regen on it, which is kind of cute. Yeah, MR Sunfire Cape exists now. Congratulations, have fun. Next up, Unending Despair. It is a armor health item with ability haste. There's actually not a lot of ability haste armor health items. There's like I know Frozen Heart has it, but there's no health on it, and then Knight's Vow, I guess, is kind of weird. Okay, fine. There's several armor items with ability haste on them. Okay, whatever. Either way, I think tanks are probably second in line for being allowed to have ability haste. I think that's reasonable. I also think move speed is another stat they're kind of allowed to have. I think tanks are allowed to be a little bit fast because, like, if they reach you, it's fine, kind of. Like, it's okay. They already often are able to engage. Like, what's running fast for a Leona E, right? Either way, this is a interesting take on a healing in combat item. So things that I would like about this are the fact that the healing scales per enemy target. So the difficulty I have, the concern I have over in combat healing is that it can often checkmate combats to where once you're strong enough to kill one champion, you're strong enough to never die for the rest of the team fight. This is why I think Kayn often has very volatile balance states, because, and sometimes even Kled. Like, Kled kind of does in-combat healing because he can remount. And it's like, if the champion is ahead enough, you literally can't kill them because, they both have untargetables, for example, and they both have a way of getting their health back, and the health they get back scales off their gold income, right? If you're talking about Kayn passive, it's just how much damage he deals. If you're talking about Kled passive, the remount health is based on bonus health, right? I'm not saying that these are bad designs. I'm just saying they're very tricky designs because they're often balanced on a nice edge because they can sort of like self snowball, right? And not only do they like, oh, I get more damage, it's like, no, I can stop dying, right? And being able to stop dying is a pretty big deal, right? That can get really scary. So one thing I kind of like about this mechanic and the way it's designed right now is certainly there is some gold scaling, right? Again, if you're a really, really big tank, you can get 3,000 bonus health, which is what, plus 90 on this one. So this healing is you can get more if you're Scion, right? Don't get me wrong. But the math here, every 7 seconds, this is nowhere close to Sunfire Cape. Sunfire Cape is 1.75% per second, and you can do 60% more. The radius is smaller on Sunfire, but like, this isn't here for the damage. It's not as good as the other damage options. So you can keep getting slow burn, right? You can get Sunfire, you can get this item as well. They'll add, right? They'll both do the thing. So you could do that, and you could probably add Heartsteel as well to do even more. But regardless, all those things exist. This can be additive, but the cool thing is that the healing is basically per target. So if you're in a X versus 5, you can get 5 times the healing, and that's actually quite good. If you're in X versus 2, you're only getting 2 times the healing, and so the ability to go infinite is not quite so sharp, which is nice. I'm glad it scales with enemy champion. I think it's a good design overall on average. But yeah, it is, again, Definitely going to be less damage than Sunfire Cape, unless the radius means absolutely everything. But, solid healing coming through. All right, we get an item formerly known as Magic Rock, which was formerly just called Rock. It is a shield that turns up out of combat. It is a big stack of MR. I want to point out that something like this is not as anti-mage as you may think. Now, certainly you can have games where it's like, okay, I'm building the items against the mages, and then once in a while I get to a fight, and I'm only fighting the AD champs, the enemy team. Okay, their team is 3 AP, I build Merc Treads, I go for Force of Nature or Wit's End or whatever, and then I fight the enemy AD carry, and obviously the MR does nothing, and something like this would do nothing, or nearly nothing. A lot of AD carries won't do 400 magic damage in a fight, right? MF will do some with her E, and it's not going to break this shield, right? Kog'Maw, sure, this will block Kog'Maw damage, right? No matter what your Kog'Maw build is, he's going to break the shield on his own. So there are some cases where, like, in any given team fight, like, this will just block 20% of your max health as damage, almost no matter what the team comp is, right? Unless they're, like, really, really all pure AD. So I kind of want to bring this up as, like, hey, deceptively, this item is not as anti-mage as you think, because, like, in almost any given team comp, you're going to get this whole shield in any given team fight. But what does really skew it against mages is, like, hey, are you going to build 80 MR against 4 AD? No. And so it's like, okay, well, there you go. But it is another Spectre's Cowl upgrade, so if you're doing Spectre's Cowl because of a magic damage matchup, and then bam, you get to keep some health regen when it's done, and then you get to have this, like, really, really nice shield. Like, this is probably a very, very good rush item that, like, lets you shut out Teemo from killing you in lane. You're not getting any wave clear, you're not getting any mana, you're not getting any CDR or anything, you're getting it just to, like, not take damage to Teemo, but it is still good at that. Heartsteel gets an update. It is getting demythicked, of course. The old numbers aren't here, but you can see the amount of damage. It is 100 and 10% of the health from items, so it does not scale off Cho ult or Scion W. It is specifically, no, if you're in this ecosystem, not if you're a champion who already just ends up being a health printer, which I think is actually pretty clever. And then, of course, gives you that as permanent max health, so you don't have Scion using his W to scale the Heartsteel to then scale more health, or Cho are doing the same thing. I like that as a clever lever to unbind this item from Scion and Shogun so aggressively. And then, like, if this item sucks at everyone, we can just buff the item, and it will still be probably pretty good on Shogun, Scion, and Co. I'm sure they're still happy to have this, but this can now be tuned to be just good on a variety of tanks, and that's probably a good thing overall. Big stack of health, big stack of health regen. I want to point out no ability haste on this item whatsoever. Just, big bonks and big size. So now we have support Dead Man's Plate, a very similar sized build and cost and stats toward Dead Man's Plate. The big thing, though, is you leave a trail behind that if your move speed is 400, this is plus 60 move speed to your allies. That's quite good. That's a 20% move speed amp, almost. If you're getting more than that because you have some stuff going on, if you're running Mobies, if you're running Swifties, if you've got Zeals for some reason, or you're... I'm trying to think of, like, tanks with move speed amps on them, whatever, if you have a Shurelya's or something. Either way, right, Water Walking, Scuttle Puddles, Cloud Soul, or Cloud Drakes, Cloud Map, any of the above, like, those will all add up, and hey, they matter, they do something, right? So I think pretty powerful stuff. It's definitely a cool idea for, like, hey, I'm a Vanguard, I want to make sure my team can join. This can be valuable for Kled. Kled has move speed, I believe, during his R. You can follow, I mean, his R is already really good at printing move speed, but, like, you can have more. Zeke's Conversion gets to be a much simpler and easier to use item. It is a large stack of ability haste, supports, I think, another class that is allowed to have a lot of ability haste. I just keep naming them, but I said tanks for second. A lot of supports are tanks. This is a tank support item. We're still in the family. You get a 250 total damage storm around you for 5 seconds. With a decently sized slow when you ulti. So keep in mind that, the champs I think of are like Rakan. And it's like, well, okay, Rakan is charming you during the R anyway, or not getting during the R, so you're not getting that much out of the CC, but you're getting some damage. If you're, playing Thresh, okay, well, the box is already slowing. If you're playing Alistar, probably using the whole ulti. If you're playing Nautilus, you're probably not in melee range when you're starting it. If you're playing Leona, you're probably not in melee range when you start it. If you're playing Braum, it's probably on. You're probably going to, decent amount of value here. But I want to say that, like, I think you're going to very often lose power out of this passive, just as circumstance. It's not necessarily a problem. This item is not tuned to require you to use all 5 seconds of it. The cooldown is quite short, so it's up almost every ulti. It's inexpensive. It's a good stat profile overall. It's a good amount of ability haste for not very much gold. And, like, this is just, like, a useful passive. We'll see if anything has to be retuned here, but hopefully this ends up looking like a nice, enjoyable tank support item. Locket gets demythicked. It is inexpensive, 2,000 gold, or 2,200 I should say. Decent resist, right? 200 health, 30-30. Only 10 ability haste is one of the downgrades. The armor MR aura was a ton of power here. I think this is like a huge, again, it has to be a not mythic, so this has to take a very large downgrade. This is like required. So correctly done here. That item was like obviously very, very good. You buy this item to give your team the active shield. That's the point. And the fact that this item is not a mythic means you can choose to buy this like second or third on an enchanter. If you're like, well, I really want Ardent Censer or I really want Mandate or whatever, it's like, actually, I need to go into Locket now. Bam. Or if you want to do the really crackpot Senna build, you're like, I want to go Eclipse and Locket. That build exists now. You can do that. Part of the fun here is the fact that you can find more combinations of stuff. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's Locket, right? Active shield on your team is good. Warlock gets more expensive. It loses ability haste and gains move speed. You can decide for yourself if you'd rather have that trade-off, but Giant's Belt, Crystal Embracer, Moonplate, it is a move speed item now. Tanks have move speed in a couple of places. If you have at least 1,100 bonus health, restore health per second. You need 1,300 now. Got it, yeah. Okay. I didn't finish reading this when I was going through the patch notes earlier, and I just had forgotten that Warlock was this. So basically, you need more bonus health to activate this. You need, 450, 550? 550 from other sources, so it's going to take a little bit more to get there. But you restore health. Okay, great. But you get 10% move speed. That is a really big deal. So suddenly Warmogs is not just the region of combat, but also get around the map out of combat. And hey, that's going to line up with Trailblazer, right? You get a 15% move speed amp from Warmogs. How much bonus health is on the item? 250? Okay, not enough on its own, but maybe you can get there with runes. You get there with overgrowth, something like that. We'll see. Jackshow is getting moved around to, it's actually kind of taking the place of Stoneplate. This is kind of more meant to be the tank capstone item. So obviously, a good amount of armor and MR. This is still a bit lower than Stoneplate had. But basically, hey, while you're in combat, gain stacks at max stacks, gain a bunch of percent bonus resists. That looks a lot like Stoneplate's passive, right? I believe the reason for Jackshow was the item is cooler. That the sound effects going purple was like way better sold than how Stoneplate did it, and the theming is awesome and the item is cool overall. But you're not getting the health siphon. That's the other item from up here. Unending Despair. This is the the Jackshow heal item, and then Jackshow is kind of taking the Stoneplate percent more armor MR item. So yeah, losing some health, whatever, losing a ton of ability haste, losing the mythic path, losing the heal on top, but like, yeah, meant to be a good item. And as long as the right amount of power budget is in this line of text and not these lines of text, then Jackshow is meant to be a second, third, fourth slot multiplier, and then it should be good. Dead Man's Plate gets very lightly, I would say, downgraded in that you are no longer getting the max stacks slow. That went over to speed with friends. Or whatever it's actually called, Trailblazer. Yeah, that's the one. You do get slow resist, which is actually kind of cool, though. So, in the way that you can build Tenacity in Wit's End and Stair's Cage, you can build slow resist on Dead Man's Plate. So basically opening up a few more options for fighters, skirmishers, or tanks to opt into more of the situational defenses. I will say that I am a much bigger fan of these kinds of defenses existing in the item system than in the rune system. You'll actually see some changes about that in 13.2 or 14.2, I should say. I think there's still more work to be done there, but I do like that. Oh, I buy Dead Man's Plate because it's a slow resist item. Like, that's cool. Like, I think that's a really, really cool thing that is like worth having in the item shop. Randuin's Omen gets a very small update, -5 armor plus crit resilience, right? Just trying to, again, sharpen unique outputs of items. Why do you buy Randuin's? You buy Randuin's from crit resistance. Why do you buy Dead Man's Plate? You buy it because it has slow resist on it and a bunch of, move speed is good as well. But it's like, yeah, DMP is the selfish one, right? I get to have some slow resist. I grab Trailblazer so I can have my team run fast with me. Prices aren't that far apart. I mean, 500 is pretty meaningful, don't get me wrong, but like, that stuff going on. Force of Nature is a move speed MR item. While at 8 stacks of Steadfast, 70 MR, 10% move speeds, this item can have 125 MR on it. That is the highest MR per slot by a ton. It's very, very targeted. It's very obvious what it's for. You're going to run really fast. 5% plus 10% is really good. Very targeted resists. Tanks are getting really, really strong items, and mages are losing sort of the omnipresent Liandrys, which Yeah, I mean, things are going to be quite different in terms of like mage versus tank interactions, and we'll see how it goes. I think it's interesting. Iceborne Gauntlet is getting I think, a pretty big downgrade, not being Mythic anymore. So 400 gold is obviously a big deal. The Mythic passive, obviously a big deal. But health minus 100 and ability haste minus 5, I would say, comes pretty close to paying for the gold, the gold change. The big deal, though, is this is a wall of text. So what I want to point out is your primary target is no longer double slowed, and the double slow is 15%. So now the slow is 20% plus 4% per 1,000 health instead of 30% plus 8% per 1,000 health. So the single target slow is massively worse, and the AoE slow is right, going from 15 plus 4 to 20 plus 4. So the AoE slow is better. The single target slow is clearly worse. Instead of 30 plus 8, it's 20 plus 4, right? The other big thing is you are also um, not getting the 10% damage reduction against you. So Iceborne Gauntlet, aka Cassante the item, is losing a massive amount of dueling power because now Q auto doesn't follow up with a giant like 40% slow and doesn't reduce your, fight back power by 10%. That is a very big downgrade. Now, the upside is that Iceborne Gauntlet is very inexpensive and, again, is a source of a nice AoE slow field that is better than the old AoE slow field was. So I think that's smart in terms of giving it a new niche. It is probably the best way to AoE CC people. It's way more repeatable than something like New Zeeks. Just for a different class of champion, to be fair. Excuse me. But I think it's a really cool design. I think it's a really cool item. Fimbulwinter is now incredibly inexpensive. Now, tank supports are already getting more mana regen via the support item update, but the starting component. But now it's easier to go for tier into Fimbulwinter, as the item is really inexpensive. This is like very clearly priced for supports to be able to buy. Which is kind of nice. I think this item is good. Fimbulwinter is actually good. It's just kind of under purchased. It should be in people's inventories now. The item is good. Sunfire Cape gets very lightly nerfed. It loses 50 health. The damage, okay, Sunfire was not 20, it was 15, and it's going down to 12. So Sunfire Cape baseline is only 2 baseline DPS higher than the Magic Resist version. Price pretty similar, overall stats pretty similar, but again, this thing has the stacking damage amp. 6 times for 60% more damage, but you don't get the corpse explode. So either way, they're both some pretty good items, but of course Sunfire was one of the more overpowered ones. It was one of the strongest ones, so this one goes down a little bit. Other things, of course, go up and are stronger. So, to make what you want to go for, right? Like, Sunfire Cape is not going to make you tankier than going for the tanky options, and you're not going to do as much damage as you're going to go Sunfire Cape. So, see what the math ends up being, but definitely a cool item overall, though. Still a good item, of course. Yeah, not much else to say. Knight's Vow gets a very minor update. Ability haste unchanged. Armor goes up. Health goes down. It loses the base health regen, which honestly I thought was a pretty... it did make sense for the item, right? If the point of Knight's Vow is to take damage from your teammate and absorb some of it yourself, you having some extra health regen does make sense, right? Because your health bar is going to be less than full more often. So there was a thematic reason for the health regen to be there. However, it's such an unattractive stat for players that I understand taking it away. And I mean, on average, if you saw, I lost some health regen, but I gained 20 armor. Yeah, you'll take that over the 50 health decrease, right? And keep in mind that the passive and active, your teammate's damage still heals you, right? That aspect is still there. So you're still getting healed by Ashes or Samira's damage or whatever. It's not necessarily wrong. I think overall the item probably just looks more looks better when it's built like this. The components look good. The combine looks pretty solid. Just worth noting, there was an argument, a reasonable argument for the health regen being there, but now it can just be because priced appropriately. And it's yeah, this is good. It's a good stack of health, armor, and ability haste. Frozen Heart now gets sized for supports as well. 2,900 gold, plenty cheap, very approachable, very reachable. You can buy this. 400 gold down for 20 armor. You take that trade every time, honestly. As mentioned, right, linear shrinking of items and gold efficiency is a very good thing. You're paying for the unique passives. You're happy with it. Very good item. All right, we move on to the assassin items. I think, no, there's actually multiple still to go. So this is the really, really big thing. Lethality is about 30% stronger as a stat, more or less. It just gives you one flat instead of scaling with champion level. That is a pretty big deal. This means a couple of things. This means that lethality as a damage amp slightly falls off over time, asterisk, because as your opponents gain armor, reducing 5 or 10 or 15 armor from them means less as a course of like what does percent more damage. That said, lethality is a stat you're meant to keep buying into and should roughly keep pace with enemy champion stat growth, or even do better than it, honestly, in a lot of cases. So the fact that lethality scales with lethality battles the fact that lethality scales against or poorly with enemy champion stat growth, and ultimately it ends up working out pretty well. If you have as much lethality as they have armor, you have that number percent more damage. If you have 50 lethality, they have 50 armor, that's 50% more damage. If you have 100 lethality, they have 100 armor, 100% more damage. So you really want to have exactly as much lethality as they have stats, and then you get a really, really, really good damage amp via it. Of course, the more armor they have, the less it is. If you overcap on lethality, obviously you stop scaling past the number, but this is a very big deal. Here's a data table, flashbang warning. Wow, yeah. So here is how much armor pen comes out of 20 lethality before and after. Now keep in mind, like around here, you can get like a serrated dirk, right? And so, you know, here's how much armor shred I'm getting as a result. And then here is assuming a generic target. And I only ever have 20 lethality. Like I buy Yomu's or whatever and then never touch it again. Here is how much more damage I am dealing. And like on just 20 lethality against like a level 9 champion, I am doing 3% more damage because of the rules text. Because of this rules text, I am doing 3% more damage. Of course, as you go and get closer to level 16, 17, 18, the differences are smaller and smaller and smaller. But hey, even if you're only about it, it's still 1 or 2% more damage as a class, which is not a big deal, but it does exist. And again, it gets bigger the more lethality you have, because, you know, if we went towards, like, let's say it was times, you know, 50. And then we just say this is 50 forever, right? The number on the left looks the same, but in terms of, you know, the mechanical advantage of switching over to a flat rate means like, oh yeah, actually the level 13 value is deal 5% more damage because of the rules change. Like that's pretty good, right? So this matters. It also makes it very easy to know how much value you're getting out of the thing, of course. This directly buffs runes like Sudden Impact, all that stuff. Goodbye Duskblade. Goodbye Prowler's Claw. New items coming in. Let's go. First up, Voltaic Cyclosword is Brutalizer Kerchai Shard. Yes, also Brutalizer is back. Brutalizer is ability haste skewed with a little bit of lethality. Serrated Dirk is the high lethality option, so they stand out a little bit against one another. Yeah, it is an Energize lethality item, which I think is quite interesting. You know, get energized attacks, you get them faster while you're stealthed or dashing. Pretty interesting stuff there. Your energized attack is a decent amount of damage. It's physical damage, so it scales with lethality. Makes total sense, of course. And it has a slow, which is pretty neat as well. Although that slow is not 99% for range users, only 20%. But this means that, hey, if you get into melee range as, you know, Kha'Zix, and for some reason your passive isn't ready, I don't know why it wouldn't be. But hey, congratulations, you have a fat slow on Kha'Zix passive. You're playing Talon. This is a better slow than your W by a lot, right? You're playing Zed. You now have a slow. Oh, sorry, your E has it as well. But like still, right? This is pretty valuable stuff. So it's a fat slow. It makes your abilities land, and yeah, I mean it's a cool design, right? It's a cool combination of lethality and energize, which honestly lines up with how lethality options champions like level 1 operate anyway. Lethality users now get a Hydra upgrade. They get Tiamat Brutalizer. It is a lot of attack damage, some lethality, some a decent amount of ability haste. 20 is pretty good. You have an active slash. If they are low, you actually do more active damage than if you had Ravenous Hydra. If they're not low, you deal less than Rav Hydra. Of course, there's no Omnivamp here or Lifesteal or whatever. There's no AoE damage on spell hit. Z, Q, and E are no longer, you know, going to give you extra wave clear. That's all gone. But yeah, right, pretty solid AoE. This gives you auto attacks that have wave clear, and hey, guess what? It comes with lethality ability haste that you can feel good about being a caster. New item, Hubris. Serrated Dirk, Coldfield's Warhammer. So just the default assassin build path of lethality and ability haste. I've seen the stat line in a million places before, but it's better 18 lethality, right? This is actually more more value than before. So what happens? Well, when you kill an enemy champ, you get a statue of yourself. If you already have a statue, the statue upgrades. And then if someone dies with kind of the get excited territory, if you've damaged them recently, you gain plus attack damage for 60 seconds. So it is a unlosable like Magi stacking paradigm where once you get another takedown, you are now good for the second and third kill. So it doesn't help you that much to get the first kill, unless you're really chaining kills together very quickly. But it'll let you say, okay, I got the first one, let's go. I do not know if Eminence stacks. I don't know if you can get like plus 10, then plus 20, then plus 30. But I do know that like as you get more kills, you get another statue, and guess what? Now it becomes 11 and 12 and 13. So hey, whatever. So though, really cool item, right? It's a nice little assassin snowball item, which is cool. I think it fits the entire point of being an assassin, right? You're doing this so you can get kills and keep going. Opportunity, pretty inexpensive, 2500 gold. 2500 gold is pretty cheap for legendary overall. Serrated Dirk plus Rectrix. Rectrix is this. It is attack damage and move speed, so another component here. It's attack damage, lethality, and move speed. No haste here, so this looks like a sort of like a Yomu's sized thing. And indeed, while being out of combat with champions, gain some lethality, and then after dealing with champions, lose it after 3 seconds. And hey, by the way, instead of the like Duskblade trigger of go untargetable, it's just gain some decaying move speed. It's a good amount, right? Like 150 is like a 40% increased move speed is like a lot. It's a case fast, but like this is a really, really big bump. So on takedown, zoom. And notice that there's no cooldown here unless it's missing. This means you can actually have move speed resets, which is really, really interesting, right? So pretty cool stuff. It's right front loaded early team fight damage, right? This is assassin type output. And once you're done, try to get out without being untargetable, so that this is a sort of Duskblade type output without being hopefully as aggravating as Duskblade's output. As mentioned, Rectrix is attack damage, move speed. Brutalize doesn't now exist. 25 AD, 10 haste, only 8 lethality, but that's fine. Again, it's meant to be the more ability haste version. One, it's more expensive than Serrated Dirk. All that's fine. Sorrel's Grudge is meant to be tuned toward assassins, and so the percent armor pen scales with lethality. Now keep in mind the item itself has 15 lethality on it, so this is automatically 20 plus 1.6 or so. So it's like 22 lethality or whatever. If you get to 100 lethality, it's up to like 31, which I think you can almost get I guess you get like 70 lethality or so in a normal build. If you're like really, really getting a bunch of items, that's like, hey, it's another 7% or so. And getting, 27, 28% armor pen to go with your, 60 or so flat lethality, you're doing close to 3 damage on a lot of champions, right? This basically pulls this item a little bit away from champions like Ezreal maybe, who are just like only buying Sorrel's for the slow. Well, the Sorrel's is not going to be very good. It's not good when you're poking anymore. The amount of pen is just not as good anymore. You probably just go for LDR. But otherwise, still, right, fits a lot of the stats you would care about otherwise. Serrated Dirk just is a very efficient item, so bringing it down in efficiency. I mean, 100 gold for 5 AD. 5 AD costs 175 gold normally. This would generally be a small downgrade, though of course it's still some nice amount of lethality, which is good. Looks like Serrated Dirk is retaining its status as a very strong epic that is not meant to be stacked. So keeping the lethality as a unique passive means that buying multiple Serrated Dirks is not useful. One could make Serrated Dirks like unable to be stacked. It's not hard to do that. You put them in an item group and say the item group, like the items are exclusive. That's happening to Sheen items in this patch, for example. Whatever. This is fine either way. Anyway, yeah, a bit less efficient. Serrated Dirk, to be fair, already a very good item. And keep in mind that, again, the stat lethality got strictly buffed. So even this is like maybe Serrated Dirk is still a better item than before, because you're going to buy this thing at like level 5. Yomu's Ghostblade gets shrunk down and demythicked. So what is happening? Well, still 60 AD, still 18 lethality. Yeah, so 400 gold, 15 ability haste. Okay, we'll see. Again, 18 lethality is actually a buff because lethality is worth more than before. The active is down from 25% to 20%, but the big thing is that you only get the out-of-combat move speed with Haunt. You no longer get the lethality for starting combat. Yomu is getting simplified down to, no. This is the roam and then gain controllable move speed, and the other one is no. Roam and one-shot somebody, right? Roam and one-shot somebody's opportunity, and 5% bonus move speed, by the way, to be clear, right? If you're at like, even if you're at 400, is 20 move speed. If order is still kind of high, I guess if you have Yomas, it's not hard. But like this is 10% more move speed out of combat, right? Like Yomas is clearly better at roaming, clearly better at target access in the first place with this thing as well. Like nothing is faster than Yomas. It's not close. This is like 80 bonus move speed, right? Like nothing gives you 80 bonus move speed basically. But it doesn't give you all the damage. It's cheaper, right? But it doesn't give you all the damage. And again, it has to be demythic, so it makes sense. Axiomark gets moved around a little bit. Basically, it gets shrunk a little bit. So instead of 10 plus 40% of your lethality, it's 10 plus 30% of your lethality. Considering that items that you will always buy, like Sorola's Grudges, have lethality on them now, and Assassins are probably going to be building more lethality items because Sorola's is also unique against Black Cleaver, by the way. There's a decent chance that, like, actually, yeah, the amount of lethality in a build goes up, and whatever. Either way, though, obviously on the tin, it's a nerf to Axiomark, though the fact that the stats are unchanged, they strict buff because lethality of the stat is better. Still, though, should be a totally solid item. Umbral Glaive gets grown to be not quite so easily a support item. Attack damage unchanged, lethality goes up to coincide with the cost increase. Again, lethality is a better stat. The other interesting thing, though, is that the ward damage is being increased here. So much harder for Pike or Senna to rush this very, very early on, but now sized more appropriately to be an assassin item that midlaners might buy to say, I want to make sure my roams are better and I want to get rid of wards on the way. The fact that you're going to do, I assume this is bonus damage, means that melee champions are going to one-shot control wards again, but it'll take longer for a support to buy it. Serpent's Fang just gets basically strictly buffed. 100 gold cheaper, lethality is a better stat. I've actually finished my water already, drank like a full liter while doing this. Well, we move on to Marksman items. No Rage Knife, no Gale Force. Terminus, new item, BF Sword, Recurve Bow, Dagger. It is a decent amount of attack damage on hit item. The big thing is this is your hybrid pen item. One of the things I was most pleased about with the 80 carry item update from 13.10 was adding hybrid pen to the unique passive of Ginsu's Rageblade, as that was going to be the linchpin item to say, hey, here's where your hybrid pen comes from because we couldn't find an item to ship. So now Terminus is basically the shipped version of Ginsu's Rageblade's mythic passive, which is here is where your percent hybrid pen comes in from. You can get 30% armor and magic pen from this item. It is in the fully squishy on hit space. When I say fully squishy, you can gain a bunch of bonus armor MR. This is a pretty reasonable amount. This is to be fair, fewer total resist than Wit's End. Of course, it also gives you percent pen, like it's quite good, but like, hey, it gives you, less on hit damage. Although to be fair, with 40 attack damage, you could argue this is 70 on hit damage. Regardless, though, right? Like, this is a moderate amount of durability. Though I do think on hit champions are meant to be moderately durable, like Wit's End, Titanic Hydra type items. I mean, Master Yi builds the kind of stuff, Viego builds the kind of stuff, Belveth builds the kind of stuff. Yeah, okay. This is not just Kog'Maw and Kinder or Kog'Maw and Callisto or whatever, but other champions could kind of buy that kind of stuff. And anyway, yeah, it's a mix of durability. It's the higher item. It's a solid baseline on hit damage item. All that stuff looks pretty cool though. His Rageblade gets demythic, loses a lot of power via the mythic passive, keeps the attack damage, keeps the ability power, keeps the attack speed, gets cheaper, no longer does crit conversion, no longer turns your 100% crit chance into 150 on hit magic damage, which, to be fair, if your total AD was 200 and you had 100% crit chance, you would then always do 75% more of 200, which is 150. So, Ginsu's Rageblade was tuned for 200 total AD against your crit chance, basically. And a lot of times your on-hit builds can go above 200 AD. Now, of course, Rageblade would phantom hit the damage. But basically, not converting crits to on-hits isn't that big of a change. Like, it's relatively similar. Now, to be fair, dealing physical damage is worse than dealing magic damage because people tend to have more armor than MR. Although with percent hybrid pen, it gets closer regardless. But this is like in the same ballpark power-wise. Again, I would still say it's probably still down. Don't get me wrong. I think this line changing is power down, but also Rageblade was a mythic, and it's also getting cheaper, and it's also not losing its base stats. It's also not changing its Seething Strike any. So, like, yeah, the downgrade of demythicing Rageblade is it's cheaper, and it loses a mythic passive, and it's like, this is a little bit worse. Wrath is a little bit worse, but like not that much worse. I think it's all very reasonable. Infinity Edge gets 100 gold cheaper and loses about 5% crit damage. Now, my recollection from retuning IE was 10 crit damage worth about 5 AD in like actual practice. So this is losing 2.5 attack damage for 100 gold. That's fine. That's totally fine. This is like basically not a downgrade, and it's cheaper, which is just good. And okay, no mythic passive, but like that's not much of a downgrade. IE is totally fine. Quick Blade loses 5 AD for 100 gold, which is, I would argue, more of a downgrade than IE got. It's also losing more power off of Transcendence. So I would say that Quick Blade's probably got more nerfs than Infinity Edge did, but I think it's okay. Guardian Angel gets 200 gold more expensive for 5 armor. That is a downgrade. It's getting 10 attack damage, though. So 10 attack damage worth 350 gold. 5 armor is worth 100 gold. So it's getting 450 gold of stats for 200 gold. That's an upgrade. Additionally, the Revive is going to revive with 100% maximum mana instead of 30% maximum mana. So we're going to get your full mana back. So GA is just a much better item. Great. Shield Bow gets made a little bit more simple. You are no longer getting attack speed on triggering Lifeline. You're getting a little bit more lifesteal. Same cost, same stats otherwise. Shield is up by 30, right? So plus 2 lifesteal, plus 30 shield, but no attack speed on Lifeline. So in general, I'm a fan of removing things like this because I think it was very easy to overlook that this line of text even existed. The one upshot this had was it allowed it to be a better... it allowed the item to be a better fighter item because it was much more likely that as Master Yi or Belith or Viego, you might buy this item and trigger it in like a conventional fight, like just through normal gameplay, and then just have bonus stats for the team fight, where it's much more likely that someone like a Phelios might just not ever trigger the shield, or just like gets one shot through it anyway, or whatever. Now the other side of the argument is that if a Phelios triggers the shield and doesn't die, he has 500 attack range, or 600 if he's the green gun, and guess what? He's gonna have no problem like autoing and lifestealing back up, whereas Viego or Belveth or whatever might just have to leave anyway. So I'm not sure which way those actually go, but I also am a fan of simplifying the item. Kraken Slayer just gets 5 attack speed, and it now works with Kraken Slayer, or works with Rageblade, so better item. Lord Dominic's gets to be less good of a tank buster. Notice with Mages losing Lost Chapter Liandry's, and Black Cleaver getting weaker, and Cyrilda's not being able to be stacked with Black Cleaver as well. A lot of anti-tank options are getting worse. Giant Slayer now getting nerfed from 22% to 15%. Now, to be fair, though, let's be clear about this. There's 20% at 2,500. This is 50% at 2,000. So this is not as big of a nerf as you think, because I didn't do the numbers. I didn't do the math here, but like, if you think about it, right, it takes 133 health for 1%, and this takes 112 health for 1%. Like, that's not very different, right? So if their health difference is only 2,000, this 50% damage amp would have been like a 17% damage amp. Like, who cares, right? Like, that's not a change. It just doesn't go to infinity against like Scion and Cho'Gath. Okay, that's fine. This item is functionally like not really nerfed, and you get plus 5 AD. Great. LDR is the same item, basically. Maybe it's... I don't know if it's better. I wouldn't say it's better, but it's better against like the other AD carries and the enchanters in your lane who don't have more health than you. Phantom Dancer gets moved to be actually a bit similar to Rageblade. So it loses some 5 base AS, but it gets... so I am a fan of Spectral Waltz, by the way. Just putting all the move speed just onto the base item. So it's just a 10% move speed item. It's like, great. It's a high move speed item. You buy Phantom Dancer, you run fast. Congratulations. The attack speed is lower on the tin, but you gain up to 35% bonus attack speed. So what's interesting is the old one was 35, up to plus 30, and now it's 30, plus up to 35. And it's doing it per stack instead of waiting for 4 stacks, which I think is actually very reasonable. It means we're copying Rageblade's text, but who cares? And of course, the move speed, instead of being 7%, which like instantly becomes 14, it just is 10%. I like simplification. I like this number just being bigger on the tin. I like the ramping attack speed. Balance-wise, we'll see. Right, it's hard to know, but it's cheap. It's got good stats. It gives you 65 AS. It gives you 10 move speed. It's all very good. RFC gets 5 attack speed. Congratulations. Static Shiv loses its AP ratio and loses the target scaling. It no longer scales number of targets. It just always does. Just always hits 6 targets now. Great. Okay. Stormsurge, 100 gold more expensive for 5 AD. 5 AD costs 175. This would generally be a upgrade, so Stormrazor probably a little bit stronger than before. I do think, by the way, that Kraken is going to become probably the like obviously best first item for ADCs this patch. I think that's going to be the very, very, very common purchase. Now, especially it is good with on-hit users. It's just going to be even more common. I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but it means we're like really going to see primarily Kraken Slayer. I think, Stormrazor is still totally good, right? 100 gold for 5 AD is totally good as well. That's obviously quite good. I do think Shiv, to be fair, I think Shiv should be niche. I don't think Shiv should be as common as Stormrazor or Kraken. I think its output is different enough that it should be the least common of the three. Though I don't know if it needed to be nerfed compared to these two, considering I think it was probably purchased the right amount on live. But we can retune things. It's totally fine. It doesn't really matter. Collector is actually getting moved around a little bit. This is like one of the only lethality items actually losing lethality as compensation for lethality, the stat getting better. But gets 5 AD back for it, so I really couldn't say this item got nerfed. Essence Reaver gets 100 gold more expensive. I don't think this item is purchased that often. I know one thing that was getting driven was trying to pay attention to gold efficiency on items. And Essence Reaver is actually one of the most gold efficient items in the game. The problem is right now with how good Mana Flow Band and Presence of Mind are, especially with like every AD carry already going into the yellow tree that is always have Presence of Mind. They don't need bonus mana. There's just like no need to have mana like provided for them in terms of like in items or anywhere, because like it's just like so low cost to go Presence of Mind that Ezreal doesn't have a space. I think replacing POM somehow and saying no, actually go build a tier, go build Manamune, go build Essence Reaver is probably long term a better idea, but not something that's just like easily done at the drop of a hat. But I'm happy to like redesign stuff if needed. Regardless, I think Essence Reaver will be quite niche. That's fine. To be fair though, the fact that actually it's just gonna be quite niche, and that's okay for now. All right, I think this is the last major update of gameplay stuff. Is support items and quests are getting updated. Okay, so I really like the design of this stuff. Okay, so there is now only one starter item. It is just World Atlas. Every single support buys the same item, so you all get 30 health, you all get some mana regen, you all get some health regen. You get a little bit more base gold per 10, by the way. But no attack damage, no ability power. But it means that Nautilus and Leona suddenly get some mana regen, and it means that, Zyra and Janna suddenly get some health regen. But again, they're not getting, 8 AP? For their first item, which like actually lowers the combat power. If anyone who's like to care about the ability power, they're getting less combat power. And for the support tanks, they're getting a little bit less health. The attack damage, or ability power didn't mean very, nearly as much for them, right? But what's cool is all of the gold earning has been combined. So if you can harass, you will get more, right? 30 for melee, 28 for ranged. But if you can't harass, you just get 20 gold for last hit a minion. What's nice is 20 gold for any minion. You do not have to last hit the cannon. You can last hit whatever the hell you want, and it's fine. Now, what's interesting is if you want to generate the most gold, of course, just harass nonstop, try to get the damage done, and you'll be cool. But hey, if you're Zyra and you're not getting the stacks done constantly, and your plant steals a minion, your teammate gets full minion gold, and you get stat gold, 20 stat gold. So if you can't get the cannons, because it was not there, you don't have to min-max it. You're like, fuck it, I killed 3 casters, we're good. Like, it's fine. And you get your 60 gold, and you can move on and feel okay about it, because, like, yeah, it's hard to have target access to Leona. That's okay. You can kill any 3 minions you want. You can help last hit whatever you want, and it's not like, I'm incentivized to not help you last hit the caster minion because I'm going to waste the stack and I can't use it on a melee or a cannon. It's like, no, just get whatever you want. Like, you want to help them last hit as much as you want, right? Like, getting the guaranteed cannon helps make sure that they don't miss the cannon. That's a good thing, right? In fact, it might be correct if you're playing an Enchanter, especially if like, oh, actually, I'm going to preserve a stack every cannon wave and just guarantee my AD carry gets cannon every time. Cool, right? Like, those all seem like very reasonable things, right? So I just think this is really neat. I think it creates like some very good gameplay, and just like massive shout out to the designer who made this work, because I think this is like easily the best version of Support Quest. Then it goes to tier 2. You get more health, you get more mana regen, you get more health regen, and you get, instead of 2 becomes 3, it's 3 becomes 5 flat gold per 10. Now, to be clear, baseline gold generation in League of Legends is like 19 per 10. So this is going from 22 to 24 gold per 10. Your passive gold generation is up about 10% as a total result of like this once your support quest is done. But like, hey, 10% more gold. It's not bad if you're not taking CS and getting a lot of gold from assists or turrets or whatever. Also, much like the other tier 2 support items, you're getting more gold on harass. You're getting even more gold on minion monster kill. Notice that the difference is actually much closer here, right? It's plus or minus 6 for melee, plus or minus 4 for ranged. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Just kill minions. Who cares? In fact, the upside is your teammate can't miss the CS if you do this, so it's actually probably like team gold positive to only last hit minions. Whatever, that's fine. Whereas like it's a bigger drop off here, right? It's it's plus 10 versus plus 8, and it's like, nah, it's tier 2. Just do whatever, dude. Who cares? Because like, keep in mind, like, you don't actually have champion access a lot of the time at like 12 minutes in the game, right? Great. And so here's the payoff for the items being all the same item, is you now upgrade it into a full item with more health, more regen, and again this, right? So again, these champions aren't getting, what is it, 30? 25? Whatever the ability power is, right? Senna isn't getting plus 15 attack damage. Zyra isn't getting plus 30 or whatever. Actually, it might be 40. I think it is 40. Not getting 40 ability power. Lux, etc. not getting 40 ability power. Like, hey, that's a pretty big deal, right? It's like, so instead, what you're getting is a passive active, right? It's still a Sightstone, all that stuff, but it's a on-trigger passive effect. So you can get damage reduction. You can get a small Crown of the Shattered Queen shield that, when it breaks, applies a slow. You can get Guardian with bonus health when you apply any, basically CC to an enemy champion. You slow or mobilize them. So like a baseline Braum Q will do it. And the cooldown's long enough that like you're gonna land one Braum Q or Braum R in a fight, right? Like it's gonna pop. And with the recent cooldown, like you're probably not getting two no matter what. So it's just like, as long as you do something, you're good. Also, like this will apply on like Zeke's. So if you have no CC at all, you can buy this, go Zeke's, and just like every team fight, I ult and walk in and I apply Solstice Slay, and I give myself a decent amount of bonus health. Right? That's like, it's a solid like 8% more health, which is not bad. And hey, a bunch of move speed. Like this is a solid amount of like, 25% more move speed. That's pretty good. And it goes to a teammate. Like, yeah, pretty good. Pretty nice. There's an aggressive one, Bloodsong. That's gonna be pretty rare, right? This is probably the kind of thing that like Pyke might run, or like support set might run. Senna probably runs this. It's just like, yeah, I just have a Sheen effect. Now, Senna has really bad base AD, but this is still 75 damage, which is like not bad. Like she has pretty, frequent Sheen procs, don't get me wrong. And you apply like an exposed weakness. It's like very good, right? So I could see this also being like the Even Shroud option. Like if you're like, nah, dude, you know what? I'm playing Leona, I'm playing Rakan, I'm playing Thresh, whatever. I don't need their ability, screw it. I'm gonna make you die faster. YOLO, right? You can. If you want. If you're gonna be good at using auto attacks, you can do this on Zyra. I don't know if you'd really want this over something else, but like you could. But it's there. Dreammaker is the default Enchanter one. You gain a bubble every few seconds, and then when you heal or shield an ally, they gain a damage block, and they gain basically a Sona Q. They gain damage on next auto attack. So great. You get a couple of these per team fight. Your team is going to gank, shield them. They get a bigger shield. Great. And then here's the generic damage one. 5 plus 3% max health. So you can do the math yourself on like, hey, would you rather have 40 ability power or like 80 to 200 damage once in a while on hit, on spell hit? It's up to you, right? If you're doing like purely just like I'm doing Lux E poke, yeah, this is better than 40 ability power. If you're doing like just Zyra plant poke, this is better than 40 ability power. If you're landing full combos, okay, it's more debatable, right? But like, it's clearly good. Alrighty, I am out of water, Sag. So Enchanter items are getting updated. So there is an ability haste component built in a whole lot of stuff as well. I believe it's in Warhammer and whatnot as well. There is a support capstone. A lot of decent amount of AP, really good amount of ability haste, some mana regen, gain even more AP. And now keep in mind, right, if any support buying this has 75% from their starter item, has 150 from this, so 225 already, which means this item automatically gives another 12 ability power. This item is actually 52.5 ability power if you didn't buy anything else. You buy this first slot. This is an item with 52 ability power on it, and like 7-ish heal and shield power. Now that's probably not quite worth it first slot, but like after you buy Ardent Censer or Mandate or something, probably is. Item looks pretty good, and it's pretty cheap, but it's more for the other stuff because it's meant to be more of a capstone. Because Hylia gets demythicked, a little bit cheaper, more haste, more ability power, more haste. You don't, however, print AP from the mana regen into AP. That is a big downgrade. There's a lot of power there, right? Obviously, it's going to Dawn Core here, but like that's a really big deal. Also, it's in the Mythic passive, also a big deal. Soul Siphon, I think, is actually intelligently redesigned. Instead of having 2 stacks, you have 3 stacks. So it's much more forgiving. Of course, you can burn it at stack 1 or stack 2, but you can now get more of them. And it's more forgiving in terms of like getting ultimate value. And instead of level scaling, as it would be with a Mythic, it's a flat value. So it scales with ability haste. But this basically says, actually, it's kind of meant to be a first item. Right, like, 60 health means more at level 9 than it does at level 17 if you're going to go like really, really late, right? But still, and of course, right, really easily retuned. You can tune this number, you can tune this number, you can tune the stat cap, you can, tune all this stuff. But like, yeah, this item, great, simple, Soul Siphon, that's the text, looks good. Staff Flowing Water is inheriting the Shirelia's Reverie passive. So instead of giving ability power and ability haste, it's going to give ability power and move speed when you heal and shield an ally. More regen, more ability power. The amount of AP granted, of course, is lower. So, hey, this is kind of making up for it a little bit here. It's close-ish. But this is where the move speed comes in. Otherwise, item looks pretty decent. Definitely going up in price. The more mana regen like pushes it towards Dawn Core. You can run out of mana sometimes. I have found personally playing support that I don't feel like I run out of mana after a second item. That said, if I'm playing Sona, I buy tier. So if I don't have to buy tier anymore, and because my items all get more mana regen, then maybe it works out. And I actually get to save an item, and I get to go for something like Ardent Censer instead of going for Seraphs, and I just get more power out of that, right? So I guess that being kind of the way it goes, or Staff Flood, whatever, right? Ardent Censer also grown to 2,300 gold. Seems to be the default price point here. 15 more AP. Again, a lot of mana regen on these items. Haste, heal and shield power. Move speed goes up to 8%. I mean, a lot of stat lines here, right? There's a lot going on in this item. Ether was Forbidden Idol. Now it's Ether was Forbidden Idol. Yeah, so basically nothing, but just it's more expensive. But anyway, this item is like massively buff. So 200 gold more expensive, but like 15 AP, 15 mana regen, 3 move speed. And the attack speed goes from 20% to 25%, and the 15 on hit damage goes to 20 on hit damage. So Ardent Censer looking like maybe one of the strongest items in the new patch, and yeah, might be one of the ones that you get elo out of. Very minor updates. Doran's Blade has lifesteal instead of Omnivamp. Doran's Ring gets like 80% of its regen, but doesn't require you hitting enemy champions to do it. Ornament items, if you want to kind of go through the list, you can maybe pause or scroll yourself. Bunch of new ornament items. Triple Tonic is in to replace Stopwatch. Hooray! Elixir of Avarice helps you last here for a little bit. Get some Adaptive Force for a bit, and then get a skill point. This does not let you get your ultimate early. This does not give you any bonus stats. You cannot rank your ulti at 10. But if you are the kind of champion who wants your second max sooner, you're going to get your second max sooner this way. Janna actually kind of cares. Now, it takes a while for Janna to get level 9, but like, her E ranks actually matter quite a bit. Udyr, I think, actually cares quite a bit about his ranks, and it's not hard to level on him. So there's plenty of champions who actually would want the power spike, and so you can per champion actually really care about this. And hey, it helps you get some farm early on, which is nice. You can get a little bit of power spike, Towers are about 10% more durable. Not on outers, but the rest of them. Backdoor bonus increased substantially. Keep in mind that if you're going to try to solo kill a turret, instead of doing 33 damage, you're going to do 20 damage. So you're dealing, like 2/3-ish as much damage as before. But you can now apply true damage to it. Void grubs deal true damage. The burn does, so now it applies, but it applies at also 1/5 effect. So who really cares? So yeah, backdooring is definitely weaker. Emerald tier going to get a bit smaller. Visible rank differences is going to be, looks like part of the matchmaking. LP gain is going to be shrunk in groups above Emerald, so no longer getting like plus 24 or so per win, which I was doing at the very end of my climb. New player placements will be placed closer to the appropriate skill level. Hopefully that means lower. I believe new players are placed a bit high. Something I'm actually very, very excited for is this. I think it's actually a really, really cool mechanic. I think the default bind is U. Really, really, really enjoy this. This is a really good way to be like, hey, good job, somebody. Yes, emotes are a good job as well, but I really, really enjoy this mechanic. This has actually been one of the highlights of playtesting is going to be able to fist bump. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I can overstate it. I really like this mechanic. It's really cool. Anyway. Also, dynamic music. Awesome stuff. Based on location, based on context, based on situation. I didn't realize contextual and situational were different. Either way, there's zones on SR, context with game state, and then situational is based on your actions. So some really cool stuff, new music. I usually play with music on. I recommend you do it too. It's just fun. It's nice. It's not like League is like a shooter where there's like really important sound cues, right? Anyway, in-game quests. There are now some extra PvP quests in the game. Hui and Jin have a quest going on. Belveth and Jax have a quest going on. Nasset and Renekton have a quest going on. Shen and Zed have a quest going on. My understanding is they had intended to make more. Maybe they'll get rolled out over time. I had occasional input into a couple of these. I know I got asked about Belveth Jax in terms of like how much like coral you should get and how much value is the ulti and whatever, and I just like, well, here's my thoughts, but like, do whatever you want to do, of course. I think I had some input on the Hui engine as well. Not like I determined like what the numbers were, but just like I remember getting asked about it. The champs designer sit like literally across from me. I can like literally just like turn my head and it's like, there's Hui's designer right there. Anyway, so yeah, cool stuff here. I think it's very, very fun. I think it's really cool stuff overall. It is late. I'm out of water. My throat is kind of dying. It is midnight. It's already 2.5 hours long. Sorry there's no TLDR. Maybe I'll do one later. I don't know. Or like, I don't know. We'll see. Either way, big patch, a lot of stuff going on. We expect to micro patch. I think we're gonna meet on Thursday, I think, to discuss the micro patch. Is there going to be some really, really bad balance outliers? And then, of course, we're going to meet on Tuesday or Monday to do the regular patch cadence for 14.2. Expect there to be a lot of balance updates. That's going to happen. That's why I didn't want to spend too much time on the numbers, because the tuning's going to change for sure. But again, I think this item is really cool. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on this season. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.